School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. And we got to get right into this late-breaking revolutionary geopolitical information. We ain't been on in 2 days. There's a lot going on. The dollar is buckling. Get your money out the dollar. Get it in hard assets that you may be able to hold and not the U.S. government. But we have geopolitical war all over the global chessboard. They're pissed off. Africa is free. China is humiliating the West. We're going to get right into it.
Well, this week we saw a major tectonic shift in economic world power, and Putin and China just scored another devastating blow to the West. We are watching it unfold in real time right before our eyes. This is a major shift away from the U.S. dollar, away from U.S. hegemony, and over to the BRICS nations, led by Russia and China. Of course, the mainstream media is once again hiding it from you. I'm not being hyperbolic, guys. This is as big as it gets. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, the Biden administration on a Friday just landed some jaw-dropping U.S. dollar news, jobs data, and warning bells for the U.S. economy. They were trying to hide it, of course. You always release bad news on a Friday, but we're not ignoring it. We're going to dive into all of this today. So thanks to the nearly 2.5 million of you who are subscribed to this channel. We publish multiple videos per week. We're live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time. If you're not already subscribed, we'd love for you to do so. And we'd love for you to join us on our daily show. Well, we'll get to Putin and BRICS in a moment. But first, what the Biden-Harris administration is trying to hide from you.
No.
It's now being called Kamala's carnage. As borders are, she oversaw the large mass illegal immigration invasion, the largest one in American history. And just like that, we got Friday's jobs report. And holy shit, carnage is putting it nicely.
Stocks slid Friday with all three major indexes down and the S&P posting its worst week of the year. It comes as the latest jobs report fell below expectations.
Just so you have some context here, in January, we learned that in the past few years, native-born Americans have lost 1.4 million jobs. Those jobs were replaced by illegal immigrants. But not just replaced those 1.4 million, no, replaced and added a total of 3 million. As Zero Hedge posted on X back in January, how is this not the biggest political talking point right now? Well, that was January. And now Friday's jobs report was devastating for America. First, the number of employed workers did rise by 168,000. But when you look closer at the data, you notice it's disastrous. That's because it consisted of an increase of 527,000 part-time jobs with a loss of 438,000 full-time jobs. That's terrible, but it gets far worse. Because this means that since last June, the United States has added just over 2 million part-time jobs and lost over 1.5 million full-time jobs. And those part-time jobs are not being filled by Americans. They're being filled by illegal immigrants. Again, non-native citizens, foreign-born non-native citizens. But it gets even worse because the number of job holders that had to get multiple jobs has also jumped above 8.5 million. This is an all-time high. And Kamala Harris is painting all of these people with multiple jobs as a good thing for America. But she can try to spin it any way she wants, that there's more Americans getting jobs. No, they're getting multiple jobs because they can't afford to put groceries on the table. The data doesn't lie.
A lot of these individuals, part-time workers, visa workers to come here work for the summer. I think you got all kind of people from China, Asian people. Right now, they're saying a lot of these workers, they know they're from Venezuela, but they're claiming that they're from Colombia, which is the wink. It's a lie now. They disguising where they're really from. The employers know. But anyway, people at Walmart been talking about it. I have several people told me, you go to Walmart, you have long lines at times with some of these illegals sending all the money home. They sending the money out of the U.S. The money not rotating in our economy for a few things they do, but a lot of them is sending their money back home. When these part-time workers and shit, they're not leaving the money in the U.S.
Why? This is from August. Look at the hiring of foreign-born workers versus Americans. This is all part of their plan, guys. Just so you understand the numbers, in the past month, the U.S. added 635,000 foreign-born immigrant workers, while losing 1.3 million native-born American workers. This was tied for the biggest one-month drop in native-born workers since the COVID crash. We are being replaced. But it's not just the past month or two or three. As Zero Hedge reports, the U.S. has not created a single job for native-born workers since July of 2018. And in that interval, it has created 4.7 million jobs for immigrants, both legal and illegal. Now, this gap first started right here at the start of the Biden administration and has now exploded. This is why the NASDAQ dropped 3% on Friday. And in just 10 days, the Fed is going to slash interest rates, further devaluing the U.S. dollar. Of course, the other big piece of the story is what just happened with Russia, China, and Turkey this week. This is truly devastating for the U.S. dollar dominance. Turkey has in recent years, of course, grown much closer with Russia and China and other BRICS nations. Well, this week, Turkey did the unthinkable, announced it's officially joining BRICS, dropping the U.S. dollar as its reserve currency of choice. I like how responsiblestatecraft.com put it on their news.
They're not talking about that enough in America, how Turkey has decided to join BRICS. That's the nail in the coffin for NATO. Turkey, the second largest army in NATO, next to the U.S. Turkey, the major factor in the Middle East for NATO, wants to join with China and Putin against NATO. Oh yes, this Christmas came early for Putin. He don't gotta wait till December. He's getting it. He's unwrapping his presents under the tree right now. Him and Xi Jinping. Wow, they're trying to tell us to put Kamala Harris in office. What, to talk to Erdogan, the president of Turkey? Are you kidding me? This man plays games with Putin. He will run circles around Kamala.
This coverage, Turkey's BRICS gambit is just what Russia ordered. I hope you understand how important this is. Turkey, a NATO country, is saying we're done with the United States dollar. We're done being bullied by the United States and the banks like the IMF and the World Bank that are run by the United States. If we
forever, the Europeans told the Turks they would allow them to be part of the European Economic Union. They would come in the EU, get free visas, mean no visas to travel, free travel like the rest of the European unions, open up bank, all kind of stuff. Institutions open up to you a little bit better when you're part of the European Union. Turkey's like, okay, because Turkey has a large part of its border area in Europe and a large part in what's called the so-called Middle East, but in Asia. But the Europeans, they remember the Ottoman Empire. See, these Europeans, they remember the days of the Islamic invasions and things of that nature. They would never allow the Turks to become a part of the EU. Why? Because over time, the Turks would turn a lot of their civilization into Muslims. They know that would happen. They know that would happen. So they won't let them into the European Union. So Turkey's saying, fuck it, we're going to go into BRICS.
We want financing for a big project. We're going to Russia and China. Quote, one reason for the formal application to BRICS was that the geopolitical center of gravity is shifting away from developed economies. That one sentence from Turkish officials says it all, just one sentence. So Turkey will be added as a BRICS member in October. And this comes just months after adding Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. The center of the world is quickly moving away from Washington, D.C. Many of these nations are seeking to diversify away from the United States dollar quickly because they see a significant risk to their economies if the U.S. economy collapses, which is looking increasingly likely with all of these multiple data points. Last week's data shows us that credit card debt is at a record high in the United States, savings at a record low. That's not a good combination. And the dollar store and dollar
US has nothing going for it except us. We are the golden goose that just keeps on giving, keep bringing the U.S. up out of its economic collapse. We've been doing this for so long. The only bright side is us because they know one day we got to rise up and we got to bring all our intelligence and all of our attributes back to the forefront of human civilization. And that's when they plan on dragging themselves back to the top. They never, ever, ever will separate from it. See, they was never going to let that happen. Why the hell would you give away your lamp that you just rub and get all the wishes you ever wanted? People are the Most High. So but the whole world know this, So the America in the form that it's in is going to collapse. But Russia, even Putin, he would never let America collapse totally. China will never let America collapse totally because they need America, because America got what they need and what China don't have, what Russia don't have, what Europe don't have. And that's us. That's so goddamn true. Y'all don't understand that.
Dollar General stores can't sell anything.
Wow, a quarter of its value being cut off. Well, okay.
Sales plummeting. All of the warning bells are going off right now across the United States. So in 10 days, the Fed starts slashing rates, driving down the value of the US dollar. Countries are jumping ship, joining BRICS, and Turkey officially joins Russia and China in October before the United States election. Buckle up, because relying on the US dollar is asking for disaster. So that's the news update part of today's video. Now I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is tied directly to the decline.
Everybody got prepared, bro. You know what's coming. Y'all all know what's on the road.
China has opened a new front in its economic rivalry with the United States, this time targeting the US dollar. Chinese banks have reportedly placed significant bets against the American currency, aiming for its devaluation. According to estimates, these financial institutions have funneled more than $100 billion into short positions on the dollar, anticipating a decline that would lead to substantial profits. The mechanics behind China's currency strategy, particularly its use of foreign exchange swaps, involve a form of financial shorting on the US dollar. This approach has allowed Chinese banks to profit from the dollar's fluctuations. Here's how it works. Chinese banks exchange yuan for US dollars in these swaps, essentially locking in an exchange rate. If the dollar depreciates by the time the deal concludes, the American counterpart owes more yuan, which benefits the Chinese bank. This strategy has led to significant activity in the foreign exchange market, with estimates indicating that Chinese state-run banks have built up more than $100 billion in short positions against the dollar. This trend intensified in 2023 and 2024 as banks executed these swaps to stabilize the yuan without draining China's foreign reserves. This shorting has become part of a broader effort to bolster the yuan, which has faced intense pressure due to factors like the Federal Reserve's hawkish stance and a slowdown in China's economy. These swaps have allowed Chinese banks to profit from market movements, even yielding nearly risk-free returns of around 6% for traders on the other side of these deals during certain periods. In addition to currency swaps, Chinese banks have been preparing to dump dollars and purchase yuan as part of ongoing interventions to prevent further yuan depreciation, which has been exacerbated by the global economic environment. Despite these efforts, the yuan saw its worst annual performance against the dollar in decades. The driving force behind these high-stakes bets is China's central bank. Faced with a weakening yuan, Beijing is seeking to stabilize its currency through these financial maneuvers. When banks swap yuan for dollars, the yuan becomes scarcer in the market, which can increase its value. This defensive strategy aims to protect the yuan as it continues to face downward pressure from a stronger dollar and a sluggish Chinese economy. In June, the yuan hit a 7-month low against the dollar, exacerbated by capital outflows as investors withdrew billions from China. However, this approach is not without risks. If the US dollar continues to strengthen, Chinese banks could face significant losses. In fact, some reports suggest these institutions have already incurred losses ranging from $5 billion to $16 billion. Despite these setbacks, Beijing is not retreating. Instead, the Chinese government is doubling down on its financial ambitions, including a planned merger between two state-backed brokerages. This consolidation, likely to create a $230 billion financial powerhouse, underscores China's broader effort to revamp its financial sector and compete with Wall Street. President Xi Jinping personally ordered this restructuring as part of his vision to build top-tier investment banks that can rival their U.S. counterparts. This move signals China's determination to reshape the global financial order and reduce its reliance on American markets. The potential split between the two economic superpowers seems more plausible now than ever before. as the U.S. builds trade barriers and encourages companies to reduce their dependence on Chinese manufacturing. Meanwhile, Xi has launched his own campaign to challenge the Western-led financial system, further widening the divide between the two nations. What was once a deeply intertwined economic relationship, marked by U.S. investments in Chinese companies and Chinese firms listing on American exchanges, is now evolving into a high-stakes geopolitical confrontation that could reshape global financial markets. To understand this recent move, let's talk about the de-dollarization moves by China over the years. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. China's de-dollarization efforts represent a strategic shift aimed at reducing reliance on the US dollar in global trade and finance. This move, driven by geopolitical factors, economic diversification, and an attempt to assert greater financial sovereignty, has gained momentum in recent years. In March 2024, over 52.9% of China's cross-border payments were settled in its domestic currency, the renminbi, RMB, surpassing the US dollar, which accounted for 42.8%. This marks a significant rise from 2010, when the RMB accounted for less than 1% of such settlements. Countries like Brazil and Argentina have also started settling trade in RMB. China has been offloading its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds at an accelerated pace. In the first quarter of 2024, it sold $53.3 billion worth of U.S. bonds, contributing to an estimated $300 billion in total sales between 2021 and mid-2023. This move is partially aimed at supporting the weakening yuan, which has depreciated against the strengthening dollar. China has significantly increased its gold reserves, which now account for 4.9% of its total holdings, the highest level since 2015. This shift to gold is part of its broader strategy to diversify its reserves away from the US dollar. China's de-dollarization efforts are closely tied to its participation in BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. The BRICS bloc, which collectively accounts for more of the world's GDP than the G7, is working toward expanding its membership and promoting non-dollar trade settlements. This initiative gained prominence after the 2022 sanctions on Russia, which led to financial restrictions on dollar transactions. BRICS is considering alternatives like precious metals and commodity-backed currencies to further reduce reliance on the dollar. China's de-dollarization push is reshaping global financial landscapes. While the US dollar remains the dominant reserve currency, the increasing use of the RMB, coupled with China's diversification into gold and its leadership in BRICS, could gradually challenge dollar hegemony in certain sectors. However, challenges such as currency volatility and limited liquidity in non-dollar currencies still pose obstacles to fully dethroning the dollar. The BRICS group plays a significant role in the global de-dollarization movement. China's push for de-dollarization aligns closely with BRICS's broader agenda, which seeks to reduce dependency on the US dollar in international trade and finance. During the 15th BRICS Summit in Johannesburg in 2023, the group emphasized the need to move away from the US dollar. China and Russia have been leading this charge, motivated by geopolitical tensions, particularly sanctions placed on Russia after its invasion of Ukraine. The group is exploring trade settlements in local currencies, a step that has already seen progress. For example, India recently settled an oil trade with the UAE in Indian rupees, showcasing the possibility of using non-dollar currencies within BRICS. Over 40 nations, including key oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have expressed interest in joining the BRICS bloc. If oil transactions were to shift away from dollar pricing, it could drastically alter global oil markets. The expansion of BRICS could further empower the group to challenge the dollar's dominance by leveraging these new economic alliances. BRICS is discussing more innovative approaches to avoid the dollar, such as using precious metals for trade or developing a commodity-backed currency. With China and Russia spearheading these efforts, there is a focus on gold reserves and commodity-based stability as a hedge against dollar volatility. The combined GDP of BRICS countries has now surpassed that of the G7 nations, giving them significant economic leverage. With the potential inclusion of additional nations, BRICS could command an even larger share of global trade and production, further enhancing their ability to influence global currency usage. The future of the US dollar is facing significant challenges. primarily due to the growing push for de-dollarization by the BRICS nations and other countries in the global south. If BRICS successfully establishes an alternative currency, it could reduce global demand for the US dollar, leading to potential inflationary pressures and a weakening of the dollar's dominance. Which has long bolstered the dollar's status by pricing oil in USD, is also under strain as key oil producers like Saudi Arabia are now open to accepting other currencies. Developing economies are growing at a much faster pace than developed ones, with growth in developing countries projected at 4% in 2024, compared to 1.4% in industrialized nations. This dynamism positions the global south, particularly BRICS, as key drivers of de-dollarization. Countries such as Brazil have seen significant growth in trade with BRICS nations, which grew from $48 billion in 2009 to a clear sign of shifting trade patterns away from the dollar. To further reduce dollar dependence, BRICS members are working on establishing new financial infrastructure, including which could enable cross-border transactions using local currencies or digital currencies. U.S. sanctions on countries like Russia and Iran have accelerated the move toward de-dollarization. These countries, along with others, are increasingly turning to alternative currencies for trade to avoid the impact of U.S. financial restrictions. That's all for this video. Thank you.
And drive such impressive net. While China has officially changed the entire future of Africa, as it just pledged an incredible $50 billion to developing the continent over the next 3 years. But this shouldn't come as a major surprise, as Chinese enterprises have created an incredible 1.1 million jobs in Africa the past 3 years, while investing in agriculture, manufacturing, and trade logistics. Africa is China's second largest overseas contracting market, and over the past decade, Chinese companies have signed contracts in Africa worth over $700 billion. Simply put, the future of Africa is China, and China's own future is now deeply intertwined with Africa. But earlier this week, China announced a new policy that will be a game changer for 33 of the least developed African countries. And to be honest, this is what China does better than any country in the world, providing clear, tangible benefits from cooperation. Moving forward, these 33 nations will enjoy a new zero tariff treatment, which basically means they will have zero tariffs on all products or goods exported to China, giving these smaller developing nations direct access to the most valuable consumer market in the world. The announcement came at this year's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, where leaders from all 53 African nations journeyed to Beijing to cement the cooperation between Africa and China. Just listen to the powerful opening statement China gave at this year's forum. African countries are experiencing a new awakening, realizing that externally imposed models have not brought stability and prosperity. African nations need to explore development paths that suit their own national conditions and firmly grasp their future and destiny in their own hands. There is one main reason why China is winning in Africa. China respects the individual needs of all 53 African nations and customizes a unique offering for each country focused on win-win solutions. Ironically, this is a stark contrast to how the United States has historically treated Africa. The US has always looked at Africa as a problem to be solved, while China looks at Africa as a continent of opportunity. The myth that modernization equals westernization has been debunked, and this commitment by China to work with African countries as genuine partners and not problems to be dealt with is a breath of fresh air. When the United States hosted the similar US-Africa Leaders Summit in 2022, African leaders were met with frustration, disappointment, and distrust, and told reporters they heard many big American promises, starting with President Barack Obama in 2014, but almost nothing has come to pass. Of course, it didn't help that the US hosted the summit while it was actively sanctioning several African nations, harming their development and interfering with their sovereignty. It's been nearly 2 years since the US-Africa Summit, and it's no surprise what the conference has yielded for Africa. More lectures, more speeches, and almost zero tangible benefits to the development of the continent. The US government was only interested in hosting its Africa summit to counter the rise of China. The audacity of Americans' actions is perfectly summed up in this clip.
President of the US came to Zambia, landed at a Chinese-built airport in Zambia, moved on a Chinese-built road in Zambia. The venue of this summit was actually a gift to Zambia by the Chinese government. And the key agenda of this summit was to curb Africa's cooperation with China.
Ironically, this lecture was given by presidential hopeful Kamala Harris, showing there will most certainly be no significant change on the US policy towards Africa if she wins this November. But China's collaborative approach fosters genuine cooperation, leading to win-win agreements that benefit all nations. By addressing each country's priorities and challenges, China helps facilitate development while strengthening bilateral ties, ensuring that both parties achieve mutual growth and prosperity. It's as simple as that. No military bases involved, no lecturing, and no interference with sovereignty. In fact, the respect from China is reflected down to the scheduling of the forum. Every 3 years, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation rotates between Beijing and an African city. China gives tremendous face to these smaller developing nations by personally visiting the continent to focus on economic cooperation, diplomacy, peace, and cultural exchange. Alternating between Africa and China shows the level operating field and the respect between the two regions. In contrast, the US does not have a recurring forum, but rather hosts summits when their interests in Africa are being threatened, and only in Washington, D.C. This week's African summit in Beijing has now set the stage for China's massive expansion in Africa, which honestly has been exploding in growth the past few years. China-Africa trade reached a record high of $282 billion in 2023. And China has been Africa's largest trading partner for 15 consecutive years. But this new $50 billion investment over the next 3 years into Africa is forecasted to create an additional 1 million jobs in Africa, working on infrastructure projects, green energy, and trade expansion in countries across the continent. Kenya secured 2 billion yuan to finance the construction of rural roads that will serve 70% of the nation's population. Part of Beijing's revised Belt and Road Initiative is to focus on what the Chinese government calls small and beautiful projects. Kenya's president went on to state, Kenya and China have excellent and cordial diplomatic relations. These ties have been mutually beneficial to our two countries, phenomenally transforming Kenya's railway, road, and port infrastructure, and deepening people-to-people exchanges. In East Africa, China, Tanzania, and Zambia have signed an agreement to rehabilitate a decades-old railway. In addition, China has also pledged to support industrial upgrades in Zimbabwe and develop its mineral processing capabilities, as the country is a key producer of lithium, an essential material for electric vehicles. In a meeting with Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, she said that China would continue to promote the development of infrastructure and encourage cooperation in areas such as the digital economy and new energy. In a clear jab to US-African policy, the two leaders released a joint statement stating that human rights issues, including the right to development, are, quote, the common cause of all mankind, and they oppose the politicization of human rights issues and interference in internal affairs of other countries under the pretext of human rights. This statement encapsulates Africa's movement towards Chinese policies over America's. China is not telling these leaders how to run their countries or interfering with local politics. China is once again solely focused on trade and development and working towards mutual cooperation. In addition to the billions of dollars in investment pledged to Africa in the next 3 years, Xi took another massive step by ending all tariffs for 33 African countries. Once again, this is a stark contrast to US foreign policy, which has significantly increased its use of tariffs in recent years. In fact, Joe Biden became the first president to pass over 6,000 new sanctions in a 2-year span, as the US has tried to sanction China's access to the most advanced microchips. But here is the cold hard truth about US sanctions. They've completely backfired. Sanctions have only forced China to innovate and become stronger, and now some of America's most important tech companies, most notably Intel, are suffering. Intel is the worst performing stock in the S&P 500 this year, as the company has been cut off from its most valuable source of profit, and that, of course, is the Chinese market. But here is where things get very interesting, as China is now importing some of its most valuable products into Africa. In 2023, China's exports of new energy vehicles and lithium batteries grew by 291% and 109% respectively. China is the world leader in these two sectors, and of course relies on the resources and minerals of African mines to dominate these two industries. While China has been honest about its desire for Africa's resources from the start, the difference from the West is the win-win cooperation for mutual development instead of a one-sided approach. I know it might be hard for many Westerners to believe in a country acting in motivation outside of material gain, but there is a historic and ideological precedent in China to support this. Many schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects in Africa have been gifted by China purely by goodwill. Keep in mind, only 50 years ago, China was one of the poorest countries on earth. Since then, they have raised nearly 1 billion people out of poverty. This transition is within living memory of a majority of Chinese people and has translated into their foreign policy and belief that it is their duty to share that growth with the developing world. On Beijing's Tiananmen Square, one of the most important political buildings in all of China, it reads, "Long live the great solidarity of the world's peoples," highlighting China's globalized worldview. Song Wei, a professor at the School of International Relations and Diplomacy at Beijing Foreign Studies University, describes the unique relationship best. He argues that China is the largest developing country, and Africa is the continent with the most developing countries. Cooperation between the two sides forms the basis of global South development. The China-Africa cooperation offers more voices to safeguard interests, strive for more development opportunities, and pool more strengths to promote fairness in global governance. Everyone, as you can see, the world is shifting. Gone are the days where countries can only depend on the United States as the world's sole superpower. Moving forward, nations around the globe will seek more economic cooperation with China and seek to diversify away from the US dollar and, more importantly, the US government. But now that brings us to the investing
Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, recently concluded in Beijing, where Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged a remarkable $50 billion in investments to African countries, alongside the creation of 1 million jobs. Yes, you heard me right, 1 million jobs across several African countries. As the summit came to a close, questions swirled around the intentions behind China's generous offer. What does China stand to gain from this substantial financial commitment to Africa? Is this merely a gesture of goodwill, or are there strategic interests driving these promises? As I dug deeper, I realized that this investment is about more than just numbers. It's about the opportunities and risks that come with it. China's investment is a game changer, and it's essential to understand what it means for the people and countries involved. This video delves into the dynamics of Sino-African relations, exploring what China's investment in Africa means for both parties and the long-term implications for global geopolitics. At the heart of the China-Africa Summit, President Xi Jinping lauded the excellence of China-Africa relations, describing the partnership as being at its best period in history. He emphasized that the creation of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, was a critical milestone in fostering this relationship, and that now was the time to strengthen bilateral ties further. His vision is one of mutual benefit and shared development, positioning China as the preferred development partner of Africa as part of the Global South. China's promises include a $50 billion financial package, which breaks down as follows: 210 billion yuan, 29.6 billion in credit lines, 70 billion yuan, 9.9 billion in new investments by Chinese companies, and the remainder earmarked for infrastructure, clean energy projects, and military aid. President Xi also pledged 30 major infrastructure projects to improve connectivity across the continent, supporting Africa's industrialization efforts. While China's financial backing has been lauded, the underlying question remains: what is China getting in return? Before we continue, just a gentle reminder to like and share our videos. Also, Subscribe if you haven't done to stay informed on the latest African economic, political, and social developments, and explore how global geopolitics impact the continent. Now let's continue. Why is China investing in Africa? At first glance, China's heavy investment in Africa may seem purely philanthropic, but there are several strategic reasons that drive Beijing's interest in the continent. Access to natural resources. Africa is rich in valuable natural resources, including minerals like cobalt, lithium, copper, and gold. These resources are crucial to China's growing industries, particularly its technology and renewable energy sectors. For example, cobalt is essential for manufacturing lithium-ion batteries, which are critical to China's electric vehicle industry. Beijing has secured mining rights in resource-rich countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and Zimbabwe, ensuring access to the raw materials necessary for sustaining its global supply chains. Expanding trade networks. China is Africa's largest trade partner, with nearly 25% of the continent's exports, mainly minerals, fuels, and metals, heading to China. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, further cements China's influence on the continent by investing in infrastructure projects, such as ports, roads, and railways, that enhance trade routes between Africa and China. Expanding these networks allows Beijing to secure cheaper imports while also opening up African markets for particularly renewable energy products and consumer electronics. Diplomatic influence. Africa's geopolitical importance extends beyond its natural resources. China sees Africa as a crucial ally on the international stage, especially at the United Nations. With 54 member states, African countries hold significant voting power in international forums like the UN General Assembly. By strengthening ties with Africa, China can rally support on key global issues, ensuring that African nations align with Beijing's political and economic agendas, including the ongoing competition between China and Western powers like the United States. Debt diplomacy. China has been criticized for using debt diplomacy to gain leverage over African nations. By providing loans and credit lines, China has become Africa's largest creditor, with countries like Zambia accumulating significant debt to Beijing. Critics argue that China uses these financial tools to entrap countries, potentially seizing strategic assets when nations fail to repay their loans. However, Beijing has consistently denied these claims, emphasizing that its investments in Africa are driven by mutual benefit, not exploitation. President Xi's speech at the summit underscored China's broader ambitions, framing Sino-African relations as part of a greater effort to modernize the global South. Xi envisions a world where modernization is shared equally across regions, with China and Africa leading the charge. According to Xi, the modernization of China and Africa is essential to the modernization of the world, implying that without Africa's development, global progress will be incomplete. China has committed to developing 10 modernization partnerships with Africa over the next 3 years, focusing on areas such as industrialization, clean energy, agriculture, and digital economy. This commitment is part of China's strategy to build a community of shared future for humanity, where development is marked by inclusivity, fairness, and environmental sustainability. China's commitment to Africa is not limited to financial assistance. The country has been actively involved in building infrastructure across the continent, from railways in Kenya to industrial parks in Ethiopia. One of the most notable ongoing projects is the expansion of the Mombasa-Nairobi Railway in Kenya, a significant component of the famous China Belt and Road Initiative. So, what is the China Belt and Road Initiative all about? I will explain that before the end of the video. This Mombasa-Nairobi Railway will improve trade connectivity, reducing transport costs and boosting economic growth in the region. China also plans to tackle Africa's power deficit by launching 30 clean energy projects, including investments in solar, wind, and hydropower. By supporting renewable energy, China aims to help Africa overcome one of its biggest barriers to industrialization: unreliable electricity. In addition, China is looking to expand its presence in Africa's telecommunications and technology sectors. Chinese tech giants like Huawei and ZTE have made significant inroads in the African market, building digital infrastructure and providing affordable technology solutions. This not only helps bridge the digital divide in Africa, but also strengthens China's influence over the continent's burgeoning tech sector. While we reel out all these initiatives, what is the West saying? Are they clapping for China and Africa? Far from that. Despite the benefits of Sino-African cooperation, there are challenges and criticisms that cannot be ignored according to Western nations. One of their main concerns is the environmental impact of Chinese investments, particularly in infrastructure and mining. In Uganda, for example, activists have protested a Chinese-led oil pipeline project, arguing that it will displace thousands of people and cause irreversible environmental damage. Moreover, China's investments have been criticized for lacking transparency. Many of the loans and grants provided by China are shrouded in secrecy, leading to concerns about the long-term financial sustainability of these deals. African countries like Zambia have already defaulted on Chinese loans, raising fears of a broader debt crisis. Finally, some critics argue that China's involvement in Africa is reminiscent of colonialism, where powerful nations exploit weaker ones for their resources. While China frames its relationship with Africa as one of mutual benefit, there are concerns that Beijing's growing influence could undermine African sovereignty and independence. So how do African countries defend China's investments in Africa against Western criticisms? African countries often defend China's investments by emphasizing the tangible benefits, such as infrastructure development, job creation, and economic growth, that these projects bring. They argue that China provides quick, effective solutions without imposing political conditions, unlike Western aid, which often comes with stringent requirements. Many African leaders view China as a reliable partner that respects their sovereignty and focuses on mutual economic interests rather than offering lectures on governance. This pragmatic approach is seen as more aligned with Africa's immediate developmental needs. Now, let's do a critical appraisal of China and Western activities in Africa. Now let's compare Chinese and Western development approach in Africa. In recent years, China's approach to Africa has starkly contrasted with that of the West, raising concerns that we are witnessing a second scramble for Africa. China's strategy is characterized by its pragmatism. It offers cash, infrastructure projects, and investments without attaching stringent political conditions. Beijing has focused on building roads, railways, and industrial zones while fostering trade and energy cooperation. By offering swift, tangible results, China has positioned itself as a reliable development partner, earning favor among African leaders who are eager for economic progress. In contrast, Western nations often approach Africa with conditions tied to human rights, governance reforms, and transparency. While these ideals are important, many African nations view the West's lectures as paternalistic and ineffective, slowing down progress. The West's aid and investments are often seen as more bureaucratic and less responsive to Africa's immediate development needs. This dynamic has sparked debates over whether China's no-strings-attached investments offer a better path forward, or whether they risk exploiting Africa's resources without long-term benefits. The competition between China and the West for influence, resources, and strategic alliances in Africa has led some to describe it as a modern-day scramble, albeit under vastly different circumstances. Remember that I promised to explain the China Road and Belt Initiative. Here it comes. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is a massive global infrastructure and investment project aimed at enhancing trade and connectivity by building roads, railways, ports, and energy systems across Asia, Europe, and Africa. In Africa, the BRI promises to improve infrastructure, boost trade, and increase foreign investment, accelerating the continent's industrialization and economic development. Through the BRI, African nations benefit from improved logistics and access to international markets, while China strengthens its economic and strategic influence across the continent. As the dust settles on the 9th Sino-African Cooperation Summit, the future of China-Africa relations looks brighter than ever. With a $50 billion investment pledge, 1 million jobs promised, and ambitious plans for modernization, the partnership between China and Africa seems poised to grow even stronger in the coming years. However, as with any relationship, the true test will be whether these investments lead to sustainable development and mutual prosperity. For now, China is gaining access to critical resources, expanding its global influence, and positioning itself as a leader of the global South. But the question remains, will Africa emerge as an equal partner in this relationship, or will it become increasingly reliant on Beijing? But we must not conclude this video without this advice. African countries
is not subservient to Beijing, though. It's a win-win strategy. See, China presents a win-win strategy for what's going on. The African Revolution, kicking out NATO and the European countries, definitely is being helped by China, Iran, Russia, even North Korea, you know. So we got it. The African nations, they're not crazy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Well. Looks like Burkina Faso and other Sahel region countries are telling the imperialist West to go get lost forever. In a bold move that has captured the attention of the global mining industry and financial markets alike, Burkina Faso has announced the nationalization of two significant gold mines, Bonio and Wanyonne.
You see, nationalizing. See, this is what get leaders whacked. You know, Saddam and Gaddafi were put on hit lists for playing around with these type of things. But the real kings of the golden empires, you got to think about that, especially Burkina Faso and Mali. In a minute, you have to get all your gold from them, which people have been stealing all their gold. Like people say, United Arab Emirates. These people have no gold mines, but they're leaders in gold selling. France, no gold mine, third largest gold deposits. And that's why we can never take the Congressional Black Caucus. You can never take them serious. Don't never let them tell you they're African Americans. They tell them you don't give a shit about no Africa. Why you always tying yourself to a place you don't care about? You don't give a shit about. You see, if Russia was ripping off these people for, it would be so much sanctions if Putin was stealing all the gold or China stealing all the gold. They say China trying to get the gold and they want to sanction China. But France and the Europeans have been stealing these people wealth for all of these years, centuries, decades. You know, and now finally, especially Burkina Faso, they putting the end of that shit. You know, but the French, they're not going quietly. They trying to do assassination attempts and economic hit plot, so they ain't taking it laying down now.
These two mines were previously owned by London-listed Endeavour Mining, which had agreed to sell them to Lilium Mining for over $300 million. However, the West African state has now struck a deal to take ownership of these assets for a mere $80 million. With an additional 3% royalty on up to 400,000 ounces of gold from Wanyonne, a provision estimated to be worth around $20 million. This strategic maneuver by Burkina Faso marks a significant shift in the country's approach to its natural resources and raises important questions about its impact on the global gold market. So what is the strategic nationalization meaning in the long term? Well, let's take a deeper look into this. The nationalization of natural resources is not a new concept in global geopolitics. Countries have historically moved to take control of their key industries, especially those related to energy and minerals, in pursuit of economic sovereignty, greater control over revenues, and the protection of a national interests. Burkina Faso's decision to nationalize these gold mines follows a similar trajectory, also reflects a broader trend of resource nationalism that has been gaining momentum across Africa in recent years. The mines in question, Bonio and Wanyonne, are among the most productive in the country. For example, Bonio alone has been a cornerstone of Burkina Faso's gold production, contributing significantly to the nation's GDP. By nationalizing these assets, the Burkinabe government aims to ensure that a larger share of the profit generated by these resources stays within the country, contributing to a national GDP. Then what about the immediate implications on the global gold market? The nationalization of these two gold mines by Burkina Faso will inevitably have ripple effects across the global gold market. The first and most immediate impact is likely to be on the global gold prices. Gold, often seen as a safe haven during times of economic uncertainty, is highly sensitive to changes in the supply dynamics. The sudden shift in ownership and control of two major mines introduces a new layer of unpredictability in the market. Historically, nationalization often leads to concerns about the continuity of operations, efficiency, and the potential for reduced output. If Burkina Faso struggles to maintain the production level previously achieved under private ownership, global gold supply could tighten, leading to an upward pressure on prices. Investors already wary of geopolitical risks may react by driving gold prices higher as they seek to hedge against potential supply disruption. What about the long-term consequences and strategic shift? While the immediate impact on global gold prices is a key consideration, the long-term consequences of Burkina Faso's nationalization strategy could be even more profound. In the longer term, if Burkina Faso successfully manages these assets and maintains or even increases production levels, it could set precedent for other African nations. The message will be clear. Countries can retain control of their natural resources and still operate them effectively without the need for heavy reliance on foreign multinationals. Furthermore, the global gold market could see a shift in its traditional supply dynamics. African nations collectively hold vast gold reserves, and any significant change in their approach to resource management could reshape global supply chains. If nationalization efforts lead to a more localized control of production and distribution, global trade patterns for gold could shift, with African countries potentially playing a more dominant role in the market. Then what about the global economic and geopolitical implications? Well, the nationalization of these gold mines also carries significant geopolitical implications. Gold is not just some commodity. It is also a strategic asset that plays a critical role in global finance and trade. Countries with significant gold reserves hold considerable economic power, and any shifts in the control of gold production can have wide-reaching effect on global economic stability. For Burkina Faso, taking control of its gold mines is a statement of economic independence and a bid to strengthen its position on the global stage. The country's ability to leverage its gold reserves could enhance its negotiating power in international forums, particularly within organizations like the African Union and other regional bodies. On the global stage, other major gold-producing countries will be watching closely. If Burkina Faso's nationalization proves successful, it could inspire similar actions elsewhere, potentially leading to a re-evaluation of global gold reserves and their ownership. This could have implications for global trade balances, currency stability, and even international relations as countries seek to secure their access to gold. Here is my conclusion for you. A new era of gold markets. The nationalization of the Bonio and Wanion gold mines by Burkina Faso marks a significant moment in the global gold market. While the immediate impact on gold prices are likely to be driven by concerns over supply disruptions and geopolitical risks, the long-term consequences could be far more transformative. This move by Burkina Faso could signal the beginning of a new era in which African nations take greater control over their natural resources, challenging the dominance of foreign multinationals in the mining industry. If successful, it could lead to reconfiguration of global gold supply chain and a shift in the balance of power within the global economy.
Recently, we've been closely following our show's sponsor for
how can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring.
Here's a U.S. senator caught talking about they need to make sure they can keep exploiting Africa. Exploiting Africa. That's called a fraudulent slip. And then he caught himself and said, oh, God damn, this is live. Oh, shit. I mean, exploring Africa. No, you said exploiting Africa, Senator.
How can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
Where you can get these minerals. See, the U.S. senator is making sure that the Americans can keep exploiting where they can steal those minerals. He just got caught. He said exploiting what he meant, but he said, damn, I meant to say exploring. See, let's make sure
can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
Where you can steal those minerals. That's disgusting, you know, and that's why you can't trust the Congressional Black Caucus, because they sit in there with these people talking about they're going to exploit and steal and pillage and plunder Africa, but then they don't have nothing to say. You know, this it's really disgusting.
Which African country is a nuclear power? Well, there was only one, South Africa, but it gave up its nuclear capabilities. And it's no wonder that Africa is not given the same attention in the world because it does not have nuclear leverage. The Western countries, therefore, do not fear to exploit Africa. But this is going to change forever. That's because Burkina Faso has made some secret agreements with Russia and its atomic agencies. This is to establish Burkina Faso's first ever atomic energy agency. What will this agency do that has made the West nervous? Will Burkina Faso use this agency to also develop nuclear capabilities in addition to making energy? In this video, let's find out. So, what's the story? Well, Burkina Faso has shocked everyone by establishing its own atomic energy agency following extensive talks with Russia. However, this should not be confused with the nuclear power plant, which was established earlier after collaboration with Russia. This move, which initially focused on building a nuclear power plant to address the country's severe energy deficits, has now expanded into a broader and more complex initiative. The creation of the Burkinabe Atomic Energy Agency, BAEA, suggests a potential shift in focus from purely peaceful nuclear energy applications towards capabilities that could include nuclear weapon development, even including technologies like missile systems. But how did Burkina Faso reach this point? The collaboration between Burkina Faso and Russia began with the construction of a nuclear power plant. At that time, experts knew that this would ultimately lead to atomic collaboration between Russia and Burkina Faso. You should know that Burkina Faso has long struggled with severe energy shortages, with only about 21% of its population having access to electricity. The country's reliance on biofuels like charcoal and wood, along with imported oil products, has been inadequate to meet its growing energy demands. The need for a more reliable and sustainable energy source led the Burkinabe government to explore nuclear energy as a viable solution. Discussions with Russia, a global leader in nuclear technology, began with a focus on constructing a nuclear power plant. This plant was envisioned as a means to significantly increase electricity access in Burkina Faso, with the goal of achieving 95% coverage in urban areas and 50% in rural areas by 2030. However, the establishment of the BAEA signals a broader ambition. While the initial talks centered around using nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, such as power generation, the creation of an atomic energy agency introduces the possibility of expanding into nuclear weapons development. This shift raises concerns about the dual-use nature of nuclear technology, where capabilities developed for energy purposes can also be adapted for military applications. The move to establish the BAEA could be interpreted as Burkina Faso positioning itself to explore the full spectrum of nuclear capabilities, including using it for military capabilities. But what are the new memorandums signed between Burkina Faso and Russia? Just recently, Burkina Faso and Russia signed various memorandums of understanding at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in 2024. These moves cover a wide range of areas, including education, infrastructure development, and public opinion management, all of which are essential for establishing a comprehensive nuclear program. However, the involvement of Russia, a country with a well-established military nuclear program, raises the possibility that these agreements can also lay the groundwork for military applications of nuclear technology in Burkina Faso. The BAEA will oversee the development of nuclear infrastructure in Burkina Faso, including regulatory frameworks and safety standards. While these are critical for civilian nuclear energy projects, they are also necessary for any potential military applications of nuclear technology. And as of now, Burkina Faso has not yet explicitly said nuclear capabilities will be developed. However, the agency's role in educating the public and building human resources could be seen as part of a broader strategy to prepare the country for a more significant nuclear capability. What's more, the country's alignment with Russia marks a departure from appeasing Western countries. To this moment, Western countries put sanctions and try to punish countries developing nuclear capabilities. Yet, Burkina Faso doesn't care because it's determined and it has Russia on its side. What's more, regionally, Burkina Faso's pursuit of nuclear technology could initiate a trend of nuclear development throughout Africa, making the continent gain more leverage. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. But how will Burkina Faso proceed, given that it has rectified the nuclear test ban treaty? For years, Burkina Faso aligned with global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, ratifying the NTBT as part of its commitment to international peace and regional stability. That's because the West ensured other countries didn't develop nuclear weapons except for itself. In other words, despite rectifying treaties, the Western countries continued developing their nuclear weapons. Earlier, this treaty, designed to ban all nuclear explosions, whether for civilian or military purposes, was a reflection of Burkina Faso's dedication to global security. By ratifying the NTBT, the country positioned itself as a nation focused on promoting peace and supporting non-proliferation initiatives worldwide. However, the decision to establish the BAEA under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore signifies a dramatic pivot in Burkina Faso's nuclear policy. The creation of this agency indicates that the country is now exploring a broader range of nuclear capabilities, including those that could lead to the development of nuclear weapons. One of the BAEA's first likely actions is to remove the NTBT from Burkina Faso's constitution. This legal change would remove previous restrictions and allow the country to pursue nuclear technologies that were once off limits under the NTBT. That's the same as Western countries do. Thus, the establishment of the BAEA not only marks the beginning of Burkina Faso's nuclear energy program, but also signals a potential interest in expanding nuclear capabilities beyond civilian energy production. By removing the NTBT from its constitution, Burkina Faso would dismantle the legal barriers that have, until now, prevented it from pursuing nuclear weapons development. It's interesting to know that earlier, Western countries created hurdles for countries by making them commit to developing nuclear capabilities in their constitution. But will Burkina Faso succeed in becoming a nuclear power? The simple answer to this question is, if Burkina Faso has plans to develop nuclear capabilities and weapons, there is no one that can stop it from doing so. Just recently, a delegation from Russia's state corporation, Rosatom, recently visited Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, to discuss building the country's first nuclear power plant. From August 6 to 10, Rosatom representatives engaged in extensive negotiations with the Burkinabe government, emphasizing the country's ambition to double its electricity production by 2030 through nuclear energy, as confirmed by Burkina Faso's Ministry of Energy. However, it will be quite confusing if it's said that the 4 days negotiations were about developing electricity only. Experts believe the main focus of the discussion was in what manner Burkina Faso will develop nuclear weapons. That's because such a project demands substantial investment, meticulous planning, and strong partnerships. Rosatom, with its global reputation for successfully executing nuclear projects, has the necessary technology and experience to support Burkina Faso in this venture. What's more, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has fully endorsed Burkina Faso's nuclear power project. During a visit in January 2024, Mikhail Chudakov, the IAEA's Deputy Director General, emphasized that nuclear energy is clean, environmentally friendly, reliable, less expensive, and its cost can be predicted in the long term. This endorsement from the IAEA bolsters confidence that nuclear energy could play a crucial role in addressing Burkina Faso's energy challenges. But it does not stop here. It turns out that Burkina Faso and Russia had been secretly calibrating for longer than we know. In June 2024, at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Rosatom and Burkina Faso's Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Quarries signed a memorandum focused on training and preparing local personnel for nuclear energy operations. That's because the success of any nuclear power plant hinges on the availability of highly skilled workers, making the training of Burkinabe specialists a critical factor for the project's long-term success. This goes way too far back in the past. Since February 2017, when Burkina Faso's Foreign Minister Alpha Berry and Russia's Sergei Lavrov held talks in Moscow, there has been consistent diplomatic interaction. More recently, in September 2022 and September 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Burkina Faso's transitional leaders during UN General Assembly sessions and other forums, focusing on cooperation in trade, civil aviation, sports, and education. In October 2023, Rosatom and Burkina Faso's Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Quarries signed another memorandum of understanding on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. A roadmap for collaboration was signed in March 2024, with plans to build a nuclear power plant by 2030. And if this is seen in context with the establishment of Burkina Faso's Atomic Energy Agency, it becomes obvious that the collaboration is leading to ambitious plans for nuclear capabilities. What do you think? Should African countries develop nuclear capabilities and get the leverage? Isn't it true that if African countries had nuclear power earlier, the West would not have dared exploit it? In the comments section right below, share your thoughts on what if Burkina Faso develops its own nuclear weapons. Do you want to watch
What could happen if African nations join forces to fight extremism? If African countries unite in this fight, it could greatly improve the continent's stability and security. The teamwork between Burkina Faso and Mali is an important move toward African unity. Burkina Faso is helping Mali by using drones, which is giving Mali, a country that has faced instability and conflict for many years, vital support when it needs it most. This partnership not only boosts Mali's fight against extremism, but also hints at a possible future of stronger unity among African nations. So, what does this mean for Mali? Could this be the beginning of a more united Africa? Let's find out. The Sahel region and the role of technology. The Sahel region, a vast area from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea, has long struggled with conflict and instability, especially in Mali. With 4,500 French troops fighting against Islamic extremists like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, this region has become a growing hotspot for terrorism, which could eventually threaten Western Europe. In the middle of this chaos, new military technology has started to change the situation. Ibrahim Traoré, a leader with a clear vision, has brought fresh hope to the area by using advanced drone technology. His recent use of drones in the Malian desert has shown how powerful technology can be in modern warfare. The drone strike. On March 31, 2024, a drone strike led by Traoré marked a major turning point in Mali's conflict by taking out many insurgent forces. Mali's tough desert landscape has made it a hotspot for insurgent groups where traditional fighting methods have often failed. The use of drones, or UAVs, has changed military tactics by offering real-time information, precise strikes, and reducing the risk to soldiers. The March 31 strike showed how powerful this technology can be, as the drone accurately found and hit insurgent targets, leading to a big win. This new way of fighting has allowed the military to work in areas that were too dangerous before, challenging insurgent control and shifting the balance of power. The use of drones highlights the growing role of technology in modern warfare, signaling an end to the unchecked control insurgents once had in Mali. The success of the March 31 operation is mainly due to the advanced drone technology used in the strike. The drone had high-tech sensors that allowed it to gather detailed information about the area, helping the forces plan and carry out the attack with precision, reducing collateral damage, and effectively targeting insurgent forces. Strategic and psychological impact. Drones have many strategic benefits, such as allowing remote attacks, reducing the risk to soldiers, and increasing the accuracy and efficiency of operations. The March 31 strike is a good example of this, as it successfully eliminated key insurgent leaders and disrupted their activities. The psychological impact of drone strikes is also important. The accuracy and unpredictability of drone attacks create fear and uncertainty among insurgent fighters, making them change their tactics and become more cautious. This operation also showed how crucial real-time intelligence is in modern warfare. The drone was part of a larger intelligence network, providing important information that helped identify key targets and time the strike perfectly, ensuring maximum impact with minimal risk. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Drone technology and regional alliances. The operation's success in Mali has lifted the spirits of government forces and shown how powerful drone technology can be in changing the outcome of the conflict. With Ibrahim Traoré leading the way, drones have become a key tool in the fight against insurgents in the Sahel. Traoré's use of drones has changed how military operations are carried out in the region. These drones can strike with precision, even in tough environments like the Mali desert. They provide constant surveillance and real-time information and allow for safe operations without risking human lives, making them essential in modern warfare. Drones also offer the ability to stay in the air for long periods and can be quickly deployed, making them perfect for the vast and difficult terrain of the Sahel. Their presence creates fear among enemy forces, forcing them to change their tactics and become less effective. Under Traoré's leadership, drones have not only made military campaigns more effective, but have also become a crucial part of efforts to bring stability to the region. The success of drone operations in the Sahel has had a big impact on the region and beyond. It has shown how powerful drone technology can be in modern warfare, leading other countries to consider using similar tools. But it's not just the technology that made these operations successful. Strong regional alliances have also played a key role. Burkina Faso, led by Ibrahim Traoré, has been important in supporting Mali's military efforts, using drones to better coordinate attacks from the air and ground. This teamwork shows how countries in the region are working together to face common threats. In July 2024, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, which focused on collective defense. This alliance has made military operations in the region more effective through better cooperation and sharing of resources. It also marks a shift towards being more independent and less reliant on Western countries. These nations have also left groups like the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and the G5 Sahel because they felt those groups were too influenced by foreign powers. Instead, they are choosing to work more closely with each other and partners like Russia, giving them more control over their security and decisions.
African superpower.
The AES has been key in coordinating joint military efforts and dealing with the cross-border nature of the insurgent threat in the Sahel. Beyond military action, the AES is also working on the underlying issues causing conflict by promoting economic growth and better governance, and addressing social and economic problems that fuel the unrest. The impact of Russia and the Wagner Group. But what other alliances are helping Mali? In addition to regional alliances, the Sahel conflict has been shaped by the involvement of external actors, most notably Russia. Through its private military contractor, the Wagner Group, Russia has provided significant support to the forces engaged in the conflict. The Wagner Group's presence in the region has added a layer of complexity to the conflict, as it brings with it both military expertise and geopolitical interests. They went all the way to Timbuktu, so the deployment went very quickly. We knew that they were in the center yesterday because they had their first casualty there in the Mopti area, and then we had information that they went all the way to Timbuktu. Then we discovered that it actually happened, and it is very interesting because up to this point, we don't know who they are. We don't know if they are mercenaries of the Wagner Group, as you said, or regular Russian military personnel. This fluid situation is being maintained by Russia itself. Russia's involvement in the Sahel can be seen as part of its broader strategy to expand its influence in Africa. By providing military equipment and personnel to the AES member states, Russia has positioned itself as a key player in the region's security landscape. This support has not only bolstered the capabilities of the forces engaged in the conflict, but has also influenced the strategic direction of the conflict. The Wagner Group's presence in the Sahel has changed both military and political situations. Their expertise has improved military operations in the area. Politically, Russia's support has allowed AES member states to manage their security more independently, avoiding their former colonial powers. This has worried Western countries, who see Russia's growing influence as a threat to their interests. Moscow's efforts to expand in Africa challenged Western control, creating a new rivalry between Russia and Western powers for influence over the AES member states. This rivalry has added a new dimension to the Sahel conflict, drawing in external actors with competing interests and agendas. The involvement of Russia and the Wagner Group has complicated efforts to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict, as it has introduced new players with their own strategic goals and interests. This has made the conflict even more complex and difficult to resolve, as it is now entangled in a broader geopolitical struggle between Russia and the West. Despite these challenges, the Wagner Group's involvement has had a significant impact on the ground. The group's military expertise and resources have bolstered the capabilities of the AES member states, allowing them to launch more effective operations against insurgent groups. This has been particularly important in the fight against groups that have proven resilient and difficult to defeat using conventional military tactics. The Wagner Group has also provided valuable training and support to the AES member states, helping to improve the professionalism and effectiveness of their armed forces. This has been crucial in building the capacity of the AES member states to respond to the insurgent threat on their own, without relying on external support. The group's involvement has, therefore, been a key factor in the AES's ability to take control of its security and assert its independence on the regional and global stage. The use of drone technology in the Sahel under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré has marked a new chapter in the region's ongoing conflict. The successful deployment of drones in Mali has demonstrated the profound impact that technology can have on the battlefield. Do you think African nations can overcome any challenge if they unite? What if their military forces join together? Will Africa become stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video and want more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We're here to bring you stories about Black culture, history.
Europe do not care one bit about Africa. Some people think we are just talking. Recently, the leaders of the AES Confederation, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and General Tiani of Niger, sent a letter to the UN Security Council condemning Ukraine's support for the Tuareg rebels, who have caused chaos and insecurity in Mali. Yes, you heard that right. Ukraine gave ample support to the armed rebels in Mali, which led to the deaths of dozens of Malian soldiers, as well as Russian soldiers. How wicked and atrocious is that? Doesn't this action by Ukraine constitute a crime against humanity? Will the United Nations respond to the AES Confederation? Let's find out. When the Prime Minister of Mali sent a letter to the UN Security Council earlier this year about how they have evidence that France was responsible for arming the rebels and causing the insecurity in Mali, the UN Security Council didn't respond to the letter, and most people did not believe him. But a recent event that happened just showed that what Mali's prime minister said.
CNN, MSNBC, nobody want to talk about this, the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm putting this in my files. I will be asking every last one of them about what did they know and when did they know it? When did they know that Ukraine was working with terrorists in Africa? These so-called African Americans who was on the Congressional Black Caucus. When did they find out? Because they're at the United Nations, the evidence has been presented that Ukraine is working with Al-Qaeda. But they started saying, give our money to Ukraine. God damn, I told y'all they was working with the neo-Nazis you didn't kill. Now they working with Al-Qaeda. I thought Al-Qaeda attacked America on 9/11. Ukraine is working with the people who attacked America on 9/11? What type of scandal is this?
Has an iota of truth. The fact is that the West only cares about their interests and does not care who gets burned on the path to getting or actualizing those interests. Think about what happened last month. You know, Mali, as well as other countries in the Sahel, are currently battling with insecurity, either from Islamic jihadists or, in the case of Mali, the Tuareg armed rebels. These rebels have been causing chaos and insecurity in Mali since 2012, and according to them, they are fighting for their supposed independence. At one point, they even collaborated with the Islamist jihadists, who were still few at the time, until they separated. But are they truly fighting for their independence? When African nationalists were fighting for their independence, they didn't go about killing people and destroying properties. They achieved their vision with their voice. But all the Tuareg separatists have done since 2012 is cause chaos and insecurity, which means that they are not truly fighting for independence as they say, but they have an ulterior motive. Now, late last month, these rebels launched a heavy attack on Mali's military, which led to the death of at least 84 Russian mercenaries and 47 Malian soldiers over 3 days of fighting. While the nation was still reeling from the losses suffered, the spokesperson for Ukraine's military intelligence agency, Andriy Yusov, told the public broadcaster Suspilna that the Malian rebels had received all the information they needed, which allowed them to carry out their operation against the Russian war criminals. In fact, he categorically said, the rebels received the necessary information they needed that allowed them to conduct a successful operation. To make matters worse, after the attack, the Tuareg rebels published an appeal to Ukrainians. They expressed solidarity with Ukraine in the fight against Russia and offered to hand over the captured mercenaries of the PMC Wagner. Now, if you put all these together, the first question that comes to mind is how did the authorities in Ukraine know that the Tuareg rebels received the necessary information needed to launch the attack? Secondly, why did the Tuareg rebels express solidarity with Ukraine in the fight against Russia? The answer to these two questions is obvious. Ukraine is responsible for providing the information to the Tuareg rebels. There is no other explanation for it. Of course, the Ukrainian authorities denied the accusations, but their flimsy denial was not sufficient to appease the authorities in Mali and even Niger. And, not surprisingly, Mali as well as Niger cut off diplomatic relations with Ukraine, citing support for terrorist groups as their reason. According to Maiga, the Prime Minister of Mali, Ukraine's actions violated Malian sovereignty and constituted unacceptable foreign interference and support for international terrorism. The question is, why would Ukraine do such a thing? First of all, if you check the Western media that carried the news of the attack by the Tuareg rebels, emphasis is made more on the death of the Russian mercenaries, as if the death of the Malian soldiers don't mean much. The reason for this will tell you why Ukraine decided to support the Tuareg rebels, knowing fully well the consequences. As everyone knows, Russia and Ukraine have been at war since 2022. In recent times, Ukraine seems to be gaining the upper hand with the help of its Western allies, the US, France, the UK, and the others. While the war has been going on which has isolated Russia, Russia has been making inroads in Africa, building and deepening alliance with African countries, especially in the Sahel region. As you know, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have distanced themselves from their traditional partner, the West, and
Russia could never be isolated. Russia could never be isolated. Are you freaking crazy, nigga? Russia got good friends with more than half the world. No, the Europeans, the old world, they're isolated. No one gives a damn about them. They old. The new thing is popping now. Big things popping. The BS imperialism is stopping. Russia is good with Africa. Russia is good with South America. Russia good with majority of Asia. How the hell is Russia isolated? See, Russia good with the Middle East, except if you Al-Qaeda and ISIS. All the Muslim world cut for Russia, except if you Al-Qaeda and ISIS. See, this is propaganda. Isolate Russia. They tried and failed miserably. You can't isolate Russia. Russia is resource rich. Everybody got to do business with them. They don't need no fucking body. That's a lot. They do need customers. I got to regroup. They do need customers like India and China and these African nations, South America. They do, but they got the resources to do good business. And they the most powerful military in the fucking world. They proving it right now. U.S. military is all on paper. They done ripped off the tax base. The weapons don't work.
And chosen Russia and other non-Western countries such as China and Turkey as partners.
Salute. Revolution is a way of life.
In Mali, for instance, since Captain Assimi Goïta came into power, he has kicked out most of the Western and European forces that were stationed in Mali to help fight the insecurity and replace them.
Kick their ass out German, get out French, get out US, get out Belgium, get out Dutch, get out Portuguese, get out Spain, get out. First of all, how the hell is all of these European nations in these countries and they can't defeat rebel groups? Man, get the fuck out of here. That's the biggest scam. They can't defeat the rebel groups in Africa. Oh my goodness, why did you kill Gaddafi? And the rebel groups armed themselves after you killed Gaddafi. But anyway, NATO could defeat these small rebel groups, bro. Nah, they've been stealing resources the whole goddamn time. But now Putin has had enough. I was reporting on this last year. Putin armed these nations. Nasty humiliation. Now the whole world knows because of Ukraine armed the Tuareg rebels against Mali and killed a bunch of Russians and Malian soldiers. Now and then bragged about it. Now the whole world, it's on record. They took it to the UN. Say, wait a minute. Why is Ukraine working with Al Qaeda and ISIS? And how the hell did Ukraine, which know just where to go get with Al Qaeda and ISIS? How? Because the Europeans told them. They've been working with these people the whole time.
Them with the soldiers from Russia's Wagner group. Interestingly, with Russia's Wagner, Mali has been able to gain some victory over the Tuareg rebels. Late last year, Mali was able to recover Kidal, a region in Mali that had formerly been taken over by the Tuareg rebels. However, Russia's growing influence in Africa seems to be a thorn in the side of the West.
See, France and the Europeans said that city right there, Kidal, they said for 10 years they couldn't take it back from the rebels. While the rebels were stealing all the gold, all the valuable resources, who did they get this stuff to? All of a sudden, the rebels want lithium, uranium. All of a sudden now, they get the hell out of here. Like ISIS was seizing oil fields in Syria. Man, get out of here. What the hell ISIS went with that oil? But anyway, the Europeans said they couldn't take this city. The Russians stepped in, bada bing, bada boom, about a two-month battle. They took the city. 2 months. They took the city from the rebels. 10 years, France and them acting like they couldn't take it. This gig is up.
West, which regard Russia as its greatest enemy and an evil that needs to be destroyed. So, with this background, you can imagine why Ukraine would not want Russia to gain more influence in Africa. Essentially, the authorities in Ukraine decided to help the Tuareg rebels by providing the necessary information needed to defeat Wagner, and unfortunately, they succeeded. According to the report, the attack appears to be the heaviest defeat suffered by Wagner since it stepped into the conflict 2 years ago.
That's all right, you lose battles.
For Ukraine, the elimination of a handful of Wagner mercenaries, whose loss would cause no meaningful harm to the Russian war machine, is more important to its cause than the support of entire African nations and the lives of African soldiers. Basically, the statement made by the spokesperson for Ukraine's military was a statement of gloat against Russia and happiness that 84 Russian war criminals, as he puts them, died at the hands of the Tuareg rebels. Isn't that a crime against humanity? This is why, as a show of solidarity, the leaders of the AES Confederation sent a letter to the UN Security Council in which they condemned Ukraine's alleged support for the Tuareg rebels. In the document, the heads of the ministries of foreign affairs of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso strongly condemned the alleged open support of international terrorism.
Now, I told people this, don't be surprised. You see, the mistakes Ukraine make, they don't see the whole battlefield. Zelensky's panicking because everything's crumbling around him fast, and there's no miracle weapon that's going to save him, no F-16. I've been told people the F-16 is a flying casket. Now people dying in them. You think this is a game? What the hell? He opened up the door for these three powerful African nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, to send their troops to help Putin. They got the right to retaliate on Ukraine in Ukrainian territory. They got the right now. You have attacked them, and they took it to the UN and proved you bragged about it. So no one can say, oh, African mercenaries, when they show up dealing with you. They've been, you don't understand who the president of Burkina Faso is. He's been waiting to send the youth to help Putin to deal with the Nazis. He said that. You open up the door, coked up Zelensky.
Terrorism by the Ukrainian government and called on the Security Council to take responsibility for Ukraine's actions and prevent subversive actions that threaten regional and continental stability. The question is, how will the UN Security Council react? Honestly, the leaders of the AES shouldn't have bothered sending a letter because nothing.
That's how you see now. What about you? Got to watch some of these programs. Yes, this is how you legally get your get back. You got to document it. Okay, we went to you. We didn't get the situation rectified. We're gonna deal with Zelensky ourselves. That's what the Iranians did. And Iran still finna get Israel. Y'all, we still waiting on that get back. They've been saying they building it technically. They building it up. Okay. When Iran was first attacked in Syria, they embassy, they consulate by the Israel and several Iranian generals and staff was killed. Iran took it to the UN Security Council, knowing they could do nothing because France, Britain, US could block it, veto it. That don't matter. That's what they're doing. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Go to UN Security Council. Ukraine working with terrorists. Here's the proof. They bragged about it and said they're going to continue to do it. You're not going to deal with Ukraine? Cool. Then they're going to deal with Ukraine.
Nothing will be done. Ukraine, just like the other Western countries that have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, will not be sanctioned or penalized. Why? Simple. The West is in charge of the UN Security Council. There is no African country representing Africa in that council, so nothing will be done. The reverse will be the case if this was done by an African country. It would take only a few hours for the world to hear that that African country has been sanctioned and penalized. How many Western countries have you heard that have been sanctioned? It seems it's only countries in the global South that commits crimes worthy of being punished. How hypocritical of the West. The best thing that could be done has already been done, which is cutting off diplomatic ties with Ukraine, and it would really be nice if all African countries follow in the footsteps of the AES Confederation. Just imagine how Ukraine was ready to sacrifice the lives of Malian soldiers and the instability in another country just because it is in a war with Russia. Where is the humanity and justice that the West is always talking about? For too long, Africa has been the subject and playground of the interest of the West. Isn't it time for Africa to stand up? To make matters worse, the leaders of most African countries are working in cahoots with the West to make the continent remain as it is.
Yeah.
It is such a shame that these leaders are too wicked and greedy.
Those are Commonwealth nations, Nigeria, Kenya. See, when I found that out, they still up under the rule of Britain. They still lean towards British, what Britain got to say, Okay, all right, let's look at this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. You know you chose the wrong career as a politician when you do your adversaries' work for them. My understanding is that in politics, once you hit the point when all your opponent has to do is to quote you directly, word for word, in order to benefit their own agenda, things aren't exactly going in your favor. As Ukrainian media channels are posting that Ukrainian cities and towns cannot find men to perform typically male labor-intensive jobs in the city, although, of course, typically it would be a simple thing to do to find labor for that, the problem now is there are simply not enough men left anymore. But Senator Lindsey Graham says that is not good enough. Send whoever's left to the front because Ukraine is sitting on $1 trillion worth of mineral resources that he would really love to get his hands on. Don't get me wrong, I want the US economy to thrive just as much as I want to see the economies of every single.
This $26 trillion that Ukraine is sitting on, I already reported on that. We're going to touch on that again. Half of it, more than half, is already gone. That belongs to Russia now. That's what they've been fighting over in the Donbass. Even Hitler wanted this land. That's why Hitler was fighting over this land and more, because they been knew what Ukraine was sitting on. This ain't nothing new. They might discover a few more new items, but they've been new about the large deposit and how resource rich. Hitler wanted to come take the soil in dump trucks and ship it back to area because some of the soil in eastern Ukraine, once you mix it with dead soil, it brings it to life. Yeah, I don't know how, but that was what they were saying. So just understand, Putin already sees more than half of 26 trillion. They ain't getting that back never, as long as the earth is still here. That's done with. So what they're trying to do is at least hold on to the rest of the trillion. So Lindsey Graham is telling Zelensky, you fight till there's no males left in your goddamn country. Well, that's serious business. It's no surrender or retreat. They're demanding, because people were reporting on this. It make perfect sense. They don't want Ukrainians on their territory. Salute, family. You think they actually give a damn about the Ukrainian men? No, the young men dying. That means your population you won't be able to reproduce males. The women have to marry foreigners who come, like the Americans and the British and the Germans and the Polish and the Italians. And the people from Israel come back because they say that's their land too, which it absolutely is ancient Israeli. The people who saying that are ancient Israeli, excuse me, the K word, the K mafia word that we would never use on this platform.
Every single country in the world thriving, but using several generations of poor Ukrainians, because that is precisely who's sent to the front. Poor Ukrainians, those who didn't have the means to flee the country as Ukrainian corrupt politicians fled the country. Using these people as tools to help you get your hands on their natural minerals, on their natural, so extraordinarily low. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham himself speaking to Zelensky, and I will remind you that Zelensky's presidential term expired on May the 20th, 2024. Take a look.
I'm here with President Zelensky. I am such a admirer of what you and your country have done. You're trying to stop the Russians so we don't have to fight them. They don't want any American troops. They just need weapons to free their country of a terrible invasion. They're sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals that could be good to our economy. So I want to keep helping our friends in Ukraine. We can win this. We need our
That's a bold bastard sitting next to that man talking about this, sitting on trillions of dollars that could be good for our economy. Talking about the U.S. economy. Well, see, this is bold. And remember, I just played earlier, the U.S. Senator said they want to exploit the African resources. What is it say? The U.S. want to steal resources wherever it's at. This man saying that them resources, them trillions of resources in Ukraine, gonna be good for the U.S. economy. You ain't getting none of that, Lindsey Graham. You and your pathetic NATO army will never see none of that.
our help. Yes, we need, and we have already, the biggest help is the support of American people and support of our friends, thanks to Lindsey and his colleagues, to congressmen and senators from the United States. Thanks for this support, bipartisan support. Thank you so much. Peace is coming.
Zelensky, the world richest man. Zelensky, the world richest man right now. Zelensky got all the money. That's serious goddamn biscuit. That's serious business. Zelensky, the world richest man, and he got more weapons than any other goddamn country. It's a serious business, man. Zelensky's a dictator. The U.S. created a Frankenstein. That's why he more extreme than ever. He sacked everybody around him. He said he needs some fresh ideas. Nobody will say that. Yeah, you gotta go, Zelensky. You the problem. But Putin will never remove Zelensky because Zelensky's doing too good a job destroying Ukraine, his goddamn self.
Yes, soon.
Graham is right in that Ukraine does have vast natural resources. Critical minerals mining is one of the biggest businesses today, with governments around the world racing to secure access to those resources that will allow an efficient transition to sustainable energy production. In the case with Ukraine, exploration and mining licenses have reportedly already been awarded to Australian, UK, US, and Turkish companies. Companies whose interest...
We know exploring shit in Ukraine, Australia, Turkey, UK. None of y'all won't be digging nowhere in Ukraine ever. That's over with. I don't care what BlackRock business they thought they was gonna get. See, that's what they trying to fight so hard for. But you lost. No matter what you do, them licenses is toilet paper. Unless you ask Putin for permission.
interests are now being actively defended by Ukrainian men and women on the front lines. According to this map, all the minerals and other resources are valued at approximately 26 trillion with a T dollars. There are fossil fuels such as coal, oil and gas, and minerals, including iron ores, cobalt and lithium that are needed for green energy transition, copper and zinc, sulfur, uranium, gold, and a range of other valuable resources. It was not the first time that the US senator openly used Ukraine's natural resources to justify, to promote continuing the war. Here's him again. This was another interview that he recently gave. And in this particular interview that you're about to watch, Graham is taking his time to explain precisely what resources Ukraine has. He studied it well. He says Ukraine is in the top 10 globally for stores of iron, manganese, titanium, graphite, and uranium. It also has some of the largest coal, oil, and gas reserves in the world, he says. Take a look.
They're sitting on 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can
give it to him. He kicked your ass and he took it. You didn't give him nothing. A million Ukrainians dead. What the hell wrong with you? So you didn't give nothing, Lindsay. He took it. He took it. Now he's just saying, fuck it, he's going to finish the rest. You're not listening to the Russians. They say soon there won't even be a place called Ukraine. And since Zelensky's a dictator, his presidential mandate ran out, they say there's nobody to negotiate with. So they just got to destroy the country.
Can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war, but they're sitting on a gold mine.
These minerals are essential in making chips, smartphones, solar panels, laptops, and electronic vehicles. In early 2023, Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said that Ukraine will allow foreign investors to develop 26 separate fields of deposits of titanium, uranium, lithium, and salt. The largest investor is BVG Group, an investment company that was established in 2015.
Hold on, man. Now we paying attention to this shit. The largest salt mine, I thought was... The largest salt mine in Ukraine already been seized by the Russians. The largest salt mine in Europe has already been seized by the Russians. So get the salt off your mind. You're not dealing no salt no more. That belongs to Putin now, man. Now, if you want to buy something back for cheap on the black market, you got to ask the Russians about that. So all that salt business Europe had on their mind, that's over with because you decided to anger Putin.
A year after the Maidan coup of 2014, it was established by a famous Ukrainian oligarch, Gennady Butkevich, who is actively partnering with Western entities to mine and export rare earth minerals from Ukraine to Western countries. In early 2024, BVG met with the British Parliament, members of the House of Lords, and state ministers to agree on the new critical minerals mining project that will help the United Kingdom to develop advanced technologies and promote the transition to clean energy. BVG's news release further lays out the appeal of Ukraine's natural resources to its Western consumers. Ukraine has all the prerequisites to become one of Britain's main suppliers of critical minerals crucial for advanced technologies and the green energy transition. 117 plus, just think about that, 117 plus types of minerals have been discovered across Ukraine's rich subsoil. In particular, the country has reserves of 22 out of 30 raw material resources that have been identified as critical by the EU. Ukrainian lands have significant deposits of beryllium, zirconium, titanium, rare earth, and other minerals. Graphite reserves in Ukraine are among the largest in the world. Many Ukrainian deposits are located on Europe's doorstep, it says, which provides profitable logistics with low transportation costs. And by the way, graphite is critical in nuclear technology, so that is going to be another branch that will be actively developed. One could argue that this is just market economy, let them sell, except that in this particular case, this is not market economy. In a country that has long been the poorest in Europe due to its extreme corruption, we all know that, Ukraine is the richest in natural resources. Privatization of land, as well as sales and leases of rare earth extraction fields, are awarded to shell companies that were organized with the sole purpose to drain the resources out of the country and into the pockets of select few. In a country where, according to the World Bank, as of 2022, the poverty rate surged from 5% to 22%, nearly a quarter of the population lives below the poverty line, allowing foreign private companies to exploit natural resources is yet another crime without reinvesting back into the economy and the reconstruction. Remember, this scenario is always the same: steal the wealth of a nation.
That's why they don't know them about the Ukrainians. That's why they forcing them out to fight the Russians. They don't want none of them around.
And punish its citizens, push them deeper and deeper into poverty. This is what's happening in Africa. It has been happening for centuries, as well as in many other parts of the world, including Latin America. Rinse and repeat. The scenario is always the same. At least Senator Lindsey Graham is straightforward and blunt and honest about his true motives. It's no longer supporting Ukraine's democracy. He's being honest, and he leaves nothing to imagination. It's all about those $1 trillion of natural resources, he says. Send them those weapons quick so that they can defend our rare earth minerals. Thank you so much for watching.
As you remember, on September 3, 2024, Russia launched one of the most powerful and effective missile attacks on military and energy infrastructure facilities in Ukraine. Back then, independent monitoring services recorded numerous explosions throughout Ukraine, including its western part. In my recent video, I described in detail the result of this missile attack, which not only destroyed strategic military installations of the Ukrainian army and NATO forces, but also claimed the lives of dozens of Ukrainian soldiers and so-called foreign mercenaries from NATO countries. And now, 4 days after this massive Russian missile attack on the territory of Ukraine, reports of mysterious deaths of high-ranking NATO and Pentagon officers began to appear in the Western media again. At the same time, according to the old tradition, Western media continues to claim that the deceased NATO and Pentagon officers were allegedly outside Ukraine and met their deaths as a result of accidents or some other unexplained factors.
Lies. They got killed in Ukraine.
However, before moving on to the main topic of this video, I would first like to start by discussing with you a very important statement by Russian President Vladimir Putin. In particular, speaking at the plenary session of the Eastern Economic Forum, Vladimir Putin officially stated that the Russian army had managed to completely stabilize the situation in the Kursk region. According to the Russian president, the adventure of the Ukrainian High Military Command in the Kursk region led to the fact that the Ukrainian army was forced to weaken its presence in key sectors of the front, thanks to which the Russian troops managed to develop an offensive and liberate dozens of settlements in the Donbass. They thought that the invasion of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region would make us nervous. They thought that we would make a fuss and start transferring troops from one sector to another, which would allow them to stop our offensive in the Donbass, the liberation of which is the main goal of the Russian army. However, our opponents did not succeed, Vladimir Putin said. At the same time, the head of the Russian Federation stressed that the expulsion of enemy forces from the Kursk region and the protection of citizens is a sacred duty of the Russian army. Commenting on Vladimir Putin's words, war correspondents said that the Russian army had indeed managed to completely stabilize the situation in the Kursk region. It is reported that as of September 8, 2024, Russian troops managed to completely evacuate the entire population of the border settlements of the Kursk region, as a result of which the Russian army had its hands free and began to act more decisively, launching artillery and rocket bombing attacks on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. According to war correspondents, with each day it becomes more and more difficult for the Ukrainian army to hold its positions in the Kursk region. It is reported that Russian combat aviation is operating non-stop, destroying enemy manpower and equipment with the help of guided aerial bombs of the Fab family. The Ukrainian army also suffers heavy losses in manpower and equipment due to the constant work of Russian multiple launch rocket systems. Let me remind you that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced that as of September 8, 2024, the total losses of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region amounted to 10,700 soldiers. At the same time, the Russian military department stressed that in the last 24 hours alone, the Ukrainian army had lost 350 soldiers in the Kursk region. Currently, active hostilities in the Kursk region are taking place near such settlements as Maryevka and Cherkaskoy Portnoy. Everything that is happening in the Kursk region now indicates that Russian troops are gradually starting to take the initiative on the battlefield. Commenting on the situation in the Kursk region, well-known war correspondent Alexander Sladkov said that the Ukrainian army had failed in this direction of the front due to two factors. According to him, due to the indecisive actions of the Ukrainian commanders, the armed forces of Ukraine staged very frequent halts in the Sudzhansky district of the Kursk region. Consequently, the Ukrainian army lost precious time and the opportunity to move forward. Secondly, the lightning-fast reaction of the Russian General Staff to the current situation in the Kursk region made it possible to transfer units of the National Guard to this section of the front in the shortest possible time, as a result of which the enemy was completely blocked and lost the opportunity to move deeper into the Russian territory. Returning to the topic of the missile strike on Ukraine, as a result of which the Military Institute of Communications in Poltava was also hit, many drew attention to the fact that the Western media began to make very strange statements. In particular, 2 days after Russian ballistic missiles hit the territory of the Military Institute of Communications in Poltava, as a result of which about 100 Ukrainian militants and foreign military instructors were killed, American newspapers and news channels declared that a high-ranking U.S. Army officer died at a training camp of U.S. troops in the Polish city of Poznan. We are talking about 45-year-old U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Kamara. At the same time, the Western media did not name the true cause of the death of a high-ranking U.S. Army officer. The only thing the Western media said was that U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Kamara died on September 3, 2024. Let me remind you that it was on September 3, 2024, that Russian ballistic missiles hit the territory of the Military Institute of Communications in Poltava, where dozens of foreign military instructors were also present in addition to Ukrainian militants. Given the fact that after almost every Russian missile attack on the territory of Ukraine, Western media regularly report accidents, heart attacks, and helicopter crashes in Western countries, as a result of which active duty soldiers and officers of NATO armies allegedly die, one can be sure that U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Kamara was killed in Poltava during a missile strike on the Military Institute of Communications. Moreover, unnamed sources in the Russian military department confirmed the information that U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Kamara had been in Ukraine since February 2024, and was training Ukrainian militants, teaching them to use modern communication systems and NATO-style electronic warfare systems.
Though the West and NATO nations keep supplying Ukraine with arms and economic aid every now and then, they suffer a complete meltdown when some other country provides Russia with weapons. For instance, Ukraine lost it on Sunday when reports emerged that Iran has sent hundreds of ballistic missiles to Russia. Ukraine's intelligence claimed that earlier this week, more than 200 FAT-360 short-range ballistic missiles arrived in a Russian Caspian Sea port from Iran. These missiles have a range of up to 120 kilometers and are likely to be used by Russia to strike infrastructure and northern cities close to borders such as Kharkiv and Sumy. Moscow can also use these missiles to hit troop positions and military targets along the front line, including around the strategic city of Pokrovsk. Having more short-range missiles at its disposal would help Russia better optimize the use of long-range hypersonic Kinzhal missiles. These missiles are one of the most advanced weapons in the Kremlin's arsenal that can be used to launch strikes deep inside Ukraine. The Kinzhals are most difficult to intercept, even for US-made Patriot air defense systems. Ukraine, a nation which literally has been surviving on Western aid, condemned Iran on Saturday for supplying missiles to Russia. Ukraine's foreign ministry said it was deeply concerned about reports. Kyiv called on Iran to refrain from delivering any types of weapons and military equipment to Russia. It warned that these weapons would have devastating consequences for Ukrainian-Iranian relations. Well, poor Ukraine really believes Iran actually bothers about its ties with the war-torn country. Iran is a big-time security and economic ally of Moscow. In exchange for its drones and missiles, Tehran has received greater security cooperation from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Furthermore, member of the Iranian parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, Ahmad Bakhshayash, said that Tehran is bartering with Russia to meet its needs. The Iranian MP said, "We sell weapons and get dollars. We circumvent sanctions through our partnership with Russia. We import soybeans, corn, and other goods from Russia. Europeans sell weapons to Ukraine. NATO has entered Ukraine. So why should not we support our ally by sending missiles and drones to Russia?" Some reports claim that Iran has transferred ballistic missiles to Russia in exchange for Sukhoi 35 fighter jets. Last November, Iran had finalized arrangements for the delivery of Russian-made Sukhoi 35 fighter jets and helicopters. Iran's Air Force has only a few dozen strike aircraft, including Russian jets as well as aging US models acquired before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So, it is now counting on Moscow to strengthen its air defense capabilities. Iran has also stopped caring about US sanctions now because, as the lawmaker says, it cannot get worse than this. Ahmad Bakhshaya said, It cannot get any worse than this. We give missiles to Hezbollah, Hamas, and Hashd al-Shabi, a Shiite militia in Iraq. So why not give them to Russia? From Iran's point of view, US has been providing military support to its enemy nations such as Israel and Saudi Arabia for decades now. It believes it is totally fair for them to now supply weapons to Russia, which is an arch rival of the US. Simply tit for tat.
People at Lear are good people. They believe in America. You think it's serious? And do you think the Israelis can pull this off, given that they're not backing off an inch in Gaza?
Yes, it's serious, and it's questionable whether they can pull it off, because the fractures within Israeli society have grown. They have not subsided or shrunk. We've seen in, over the last week since the death of the 6 hostages, whether at the hands of Hamas or whether at the negligence of the Israeli military and security services, that the tensions have increased between the families of those hostages and their supporters and the government of Bibi Netanyahu. And, major clashes, not just in Tel Aviv, but in Haifa. And we're not talking about a couple of hundred people. We're talking about thousands. So on the one hand, Netanyahu's political support is as fragile as ever. But then you've also had pushback openly by the military against Netanyahu on several issues. Will they follow orders and go into Lebanon? At this point, I would say I'm skeptical. Not that they necessarily lack the desire, but that they lack the capability in terms of overstretched lines of communication, their ability to support sustained troops in the field, limited number of forces because they rely so heavily on reserves. So, when you put all that together, there seems to be more chest thumping by Netanyahu as opposed to a real plan. And let's think about it. If you're genuinely planning to invade Lebanon, why the hell announce it in advance? I mean, what does he think he is? Babe Ruth? Hey, I'm going to hit it out of center field? Come on.
Why would he do that unless he's more concerned with the narrative, about which more later when we talk about the head of MI6 and the head of CIA, than he is about reality on the ground?
Well, that's exactly, you put your finger right on it. This is about managing messaging and trying to manipulate the public, because one of the things he said in that, we got to make sure we get all these people who are living in hotels back to their homes in northern Israel. Well, they ain't going back, because the military effort that would be required to destroy the ability of Hamas to continue to launch rocket missile strikes into those northern settlements is, in my view, not within the capability of the Israelis, even if they use tactical nuclear weapons. It is because Hezbollah is well dug in. They've spent years prepping for this. It's not like this is the first time that they've been threatened with an Israeli attack. It was following the 2006 engagement, in which Hezbollah actually came out, had the upper hand in that they set about in real earnest constructing underground facilities. And we're not talking narrow tunnels like what we've seen Hamas come up with down in Gaza. We're talking massive underground structures that Israel's not going to be able to penetrate.
The president of Turkey over the weekend, I don't know if it was in response to what President Netanyahu or Prime Minister Netanyahu revealed or not, called for the unification of the resistance against him. I don't know. Is that a dog whistle unification? Does that mean time for military action? Because they already are emotionally and politically unified against Israel, are they not?
They are, but hey, the guy talking ought to look in the mirror. Erdogan has continued to allow oil to flow to Israel. As long as that oil flows, Israel is not facing an energy crisis. If Israel was facing an energy crisis, their ability to conduct military operations would be constrained. However, we are seeing Turkey. If you want to say where were they a year ago, where were they 5 years ago, where are they now? They're moving away from the West. They're moving away from the United States. They're moving away from the EU. They're moving more towards an alliance with those countries in the Middle East, and that will be aligned against Israel. That's the direction they're headed. And we got a hint of that last week with Turkey saying, "Hey, we want to join BRICS,"
which means they're going to leave NATO.
It would end up being sort of de facto leaving. I think for now they want to stay in, but yet they're not going to be the ones who are going to be get handed all the dirty work, because they do represent the second largest army within NATO right now, and yet they're not going to go fight in Ukraine. They've made that pretty clear, and they're not going to get siphoned off into some other NATO military adventures in places outside of Europe. So there's, Turkey's trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up.
With the exception of this Saturday conference in London, sponsored by the Financial Times, which featured the head of MI6 and the head of CIA discussing Kursk, it seems to be off the front pages. In fact, you don't see anything about it at all. Is there anything new going on there? The Ukrainian incursion into Kursk.
Ukrainians are losing. We talked, and I did some further research after, because one of the messages the West was putting out is, "Oh boy, Ukraine's captured 500 square miles of Kursk. Oh, big." I said, "Okay, exactly how big is that?" That's the size of Los Angeles City. Okay, that's the size of New York City, and yet the total size of Kursk, that entire region, is 12,000 square miles. So in other words, these Ukrainians are running around in about 4% of the territory. And it's not like they're sitting in all these major urban areas built up, lots of infrastructure. They're out in these little isolated villages. It says, give credit to Doug McGregor for the Pine Barrens reference, but it was like sitting out in Jersey in the Pine Barrens. You could have a campsite set up. You could be a little community out there, and you can, quote, control it, but you're not really controlling the movement of things in and out of that territory. The same for Ukraine right now. So the Russians are steadily moving in. They're mopping them up. They're just cleaning them up in one pocket after another. The images,
as unusual as this MI6 and CIA speaking in public and answering questions from the public conference was, there were comments about Kursk. So here's the head of MI6, last name Moore, and the head of CIA, Bill Burns, sounding like they're more interested in the narrative, no surprise, Larry, than the facts on the ground. Cut number 9, Chris.
Typically audacious and bold on the part of the Ukrainians to try and change the game in a way. And I think they have, to a degree, changed the narrative around this.
The Kursk offensive is a significant tactical achievement. It's not only been a boost in Ukrainian morale, it has exposed some of the vulnerabilities of Putin's Russia and of his military.
There's no excuse for this level of stupidity by these gentlemen. I mean, and it's not like they're without experience. It's not like they've suffered brain aneurysms and lost, you know, half of their working gray matter. Uh, they've held positions both in intelligence and in diplomacy, with particular Burns with State Department. I mean, what they're saying is not true. It's a lie. And you know, I realize the definition of a diplomat, you know, somebody who worked with State Department was a person who's paid to lie for their country. But come on, this is objectively has not advanced Ukraine's ability to fight Russia in any form or fashion.
Oh,
It
but
has, in
Larry,
fact, led to a loss of significant Ukrainian capabilities, and the body count with each passing week keeps growing higher and higher. That I think we're well over 50% casualties on the part of Ukrainians. That's not a success. That's kind of, by that, if we use that measure, then General Custer, good job. They're a
yeah.
little bighorn.
All right, here's Sir Peter Moore. My apologies for forgetting his first name and his title. Here's Sir Peter Moore again. This is even more absurd, Larry, because he's going to say Putin has failed. This sounds like that montage that producer Chris put together of Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, Austin, Kirby, all saying Putin has failed, Putin has failed, Putin has failed. Cut number 10.
And it's important to remember how this started. It started in this phase with Putin mounting a war of aggression in February 2022. And 2.5 years later, that failed. It continues to fail. The Ukrainians will continue to fight. We will continue to help them to fight. And it's difficult.
This is shameless that the head of MI6 should be saying in public, Putin has failed.
Yeah, I guess they think they're like Judy Garland and Wizard of Oz, you know, click those ruby slippers together, keep saying there's no place like home, and eventually you'll get there. Just by repeating a mantra over and over doesn't make it real, doesn't turn it into reality. And again, he's lying that this started with Putin. We had General Sirski himself say just the other day that this war started in 2014. Okay, and which is a true statement. This thing's been going on now for more than 10 years. It started with Great Britain and the United States launching a coup in Ukraine, in Kiev, in Maidan Square, in order to oust a president who was seen as too well disposed towards Russia and not willing to sell his soul and that of the Ukrainian people to the West.
That was illegal.
That's where this war started. Putin, he's just finishing it.
The CNN is reporting that Ukraine seems to be suffering more desertions than acquiring more recruits. Can this be true?
Yeah, oh, yes. And in fact, you know, we could, I wish I had the technical skill to put together the linkage of all the different videos of these Ukrainian recruiters grabbing people, tackling them, beating them up, trying to force them into the back of a vehicle to go off and, quote, be trained. And as General Sirski himself acknowledged, confirmed what I wrote a week ago, that these guys are lucky to get 2 weeks of training before they're shoved to the front. Well, that's not training. That's just going through the motions. And so first you've got the desertions, and then you got the casualties. So no matter how many people you go out and, quote, recruit, the losses from those two things, the casualties and the desertions, means that the Ukrainian forces are decreasing. They're not increasing.
President Zelensky has been asking for long-range missiles that can reach, obviously, Moscow and St. Petersburg. Do you think the U.S. will give them to him?
I doubt it, simply because they recognize, in light of Russia's recent actions over the last couple of weeks, and I think, you know, I know Alistair Crook talked about that today earlier with you, that the Russians are now hitting these training sites where foreign trainers are. And in the course of that, they're also killing NATO personnel, NATO contractors. Before, they may have been a little cautious in doing that. Not now. They're going to kill them all, and they're going to kill them in large numbers if the situation avails itself. So I think the United States recognizes that if they go that route, then they're asking for a level of escalation that frankly, the West, and in particular the United States, is not capable of handling. Yeah, we could launch some initial strikes, but in terms of sustaining operations in the field beyond 3 or 4 weeks, no chance. We can't do it. We don't have the ability anymore.
Here's a reporter asking Secretary Austin 3 days ago, why aren't you going to send long-range missiles? His answer is a little skittish, but it sounds like it's not going to happen. Cut number 4.
President Zelensky has repeatedly requested for these long-range attacks inside Russia. Even allies agree. So what is stopping the United States from giving the go-ahead?
I don't believe what is stopping the United States. I don't believe one specific capability will be decisive, and you know, I stand by that comment. I think Ukraine has a pretty significant capability of its own to address targets that are well beyond the range of a.
See, France and Britain is trying to tell the United States that we should give the okay. They say we're willing to let Ukraine use our long-range missiles to strike deep into Russia. Well, do it. Do it. Give them your missiles. But you already know what Putin said. See, this is where American people got to be very wary of what's going on, because they want the U.S., they want us to take whatever retaliation Putin dishes out. They want the U.S. to be involved. They don't need our long-range missiles. They got the British, they got the Germans, they got the French missiles. They work good, but they know what Putin gonna do to their ass. They want the Americans to go down with them if they go. That's bullshit. But the Americans say, no. Ukraine got what it need. Use what you got, because America know Putin already warned them. They will not be spared. The seas will not protect you. Your oceans will not protect you this time.
ATACMS or even Storm Shadow for that matter. And as we look at the battlefield currently, we know that the Russians have actually moved their aircraft that are using the glide bombers beyond the range of ATACMS. So this is an interesting argument. But again, I think for the foreseeable future, we're going to make sure that we remain focused on helping them do those things that are enable them to be effective in defending their sovereign territory.
Ukraine on the brink?
No. Hey, at least Lloyd Austin has made clear that he's got a good job alternative once his Secretary of Defense thing comes out. He will be on Broadway doing tap dance because, man, I mean, good Lord. He was going at it like Bojangles there, really great right. Form.
How precarious is Ukraine's ability to maintain resistance to the Russian military?
It's deteriorating with each passing day. So you remember, it's been like a year, 3 months ago. So a year ago, February, when we were dealing with that young man, that Air Force kid out of Massachusetts, who is leaking all the classified documents. And what was contained in those classified documents at that time was the U.S. intelligence community assessment that Ukraine's ability to sustain an effective air defense was good for about until May of 2023. Well, we've seen that's true. Because since then, Russia is able to strike Ukrainian targets across Ukraine in the daylight, wherever they want, and without any effective opposition. So no air defense, no effective fixed-wing aircraft to fly out and combat Russian aircraft. The drones, they have drones, but they don't have drones in the quantity that Russia does. Artillery, they're lacking on that. They're losing significant pieces, HIMARS in particular. the 155 millimeter howitzer provided by the United States. We don't have, the West can't supply them with enough artillery shells if they did have artillery pieces to fire them. They've lost an enormous amount of armored equipment, both tanks and personnel carriers, in their failed Kursk venture. So it's like, okay, what are they going to do? I mean, what are their actual legitimate, realistic options? And it's not like they've got a trained reserve of about 50 to 60,000 troops sitting back, waiting, saying, hey, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play.
Right.
It's just the opposite. They don't have that. So I mean, I keep looking for, show me a ray of sunshine in here.
Do we know how much ammo they have left? How many weeks or months they have remaining?
I don't, but it's not, you know, if we're talking ammunition for rifles, handguns, they probably have ample supplies of that. That's not tough to produce. But if we're talking the 155 millimeter artillery shells, very little, not a lot on that front. And it goes down with whether you're talking Javelin, anti-tank guided missiles, or even Patriot missiles. They've run out of those. You know, one of the thoughts is that the reason the United States is talking about using these JSAM missiles that are fired from aircraft is that they don't have enough HIMARS and enough Patriots, so they'll use that as a substitute.
You have a piece out this morning, Larry, arguing that the American military, the United States Armed Forces, is being degraded.
Right.
What is that all about?
Right now, across the board in the U.S. military, from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, the criteria to get promoted, to be selected for leadership, is what you look like. So if you've got a particular hue of color on your skin, that means you're qualified for a position. If you happen to be of a lighter shade of pale, then you're not going to get promoted. Well, you know, this is a return to the racism that once divided the U.S. military. It was in 1948 that Harry Truman, who didn't exactly come out of a progressive liberal family. I mean, his grandmother was she was a staunch supporter of the Confederacy during the Civil War, and she actually, you could remember the Civil War. She used a disparaging epithet for people who happened to have black skin. And that's what Harry Truman was raised around, and he wasn't above using those words himself. Yet, after World War II, when you had black veterans coming back to the United States who were being attacked, who were being brutalized, who were being lynched, Truman stepped in and said enough. And he desegregated the military. And that desegregation was intent on doing one thing, to say it didn't matter what the color of your skin was, as Dr. Martin Luther King later said, it was the content of your character. It was who you are. It was what you could do. That should be the criteria. Now, with this whole
the American military is imbued with DEI.
Oh, yes.
And promotions are based on DEI.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I've talked to several who are the currently active duty, currently officers at a variety of levels. They're getting out. They are Caucasian. I'll put that up front. They're the lighter shade of pale, but they're getting out. They can't stand it anymore because you've got these senior officers who are so intent on protecting their sinecures that they want to hang on to their job, and so they will do anything possible, including sacrificing this very principle that, you know what, we want to hire somebody because they can do the job, not because they've got a particular sexual orientation or because of how they look. And this DEI it's gone past just the racist elements. It's now gone to who you sleep with also gets to be a consideration. So, I mean, it's led to a real dysfunction in the U.S. military, and our readiness level has dropped. as well as the numbers of people actually qualified to serve have dropped.
Is the military the American military having difficulty recruiting?
Well, it depends on how you frame that question. Because if you said, hey, did they meet their goals last quarter? Yeah, it looks like they did. Except what they did to meet their goals, they lowered the number they needed. Okay. Originally, they said we need 80,000. Okay, we'll put it at 40,000. They hit 40,000. They go, woohoo, we won. We got our 40,000. So yeah, they're deceiving themselves. That's what's going on. The self-delusion, lying to ourselves, it's pervasive in the American society.
I'm going to be speaking later today with my best buddy at Fox. He's still there, Charlie Gasparino, who has a book out called Go Woke, Go Broke.
Yeah.
In which he's arguing that the woke mentality, of which you, in my view, are rightly critical, Larry, in the military, is pervading the banks and big tech and big businesses as well, and they are suffering because of it.
Yeah, no, it's like the most perverse form of racism, with the sexual aspects tossed in. Nobody controls what color you are when you're born. You have no control over that. So at that point, it becomes, what is it that you can do on your own, by yourself, or through the help of others to achieve and to demonstrate competence in certain areas? This notion that that tries to be foisted off on people that blacks are somehow inferior intellectually, it's just it becomes a cultural thing, instead of we've seen example after example of people that, regardless of the darkness of their skin, end up being quite competent. It's really a sad commentary. It's something that really affects us here in the West. I didn't see that in Russia. That's one of the things. It's curious among the Russians, they don't have this racist tint that, depending upon what you look like, they have to make some judgment about you. They were open and accepting of people regardless of what they look like. I think this is almost purely sort of a European, a Western European American thing.
Is American intel infected with this as well as the American military?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, it's, I've had 4 cases I know of they were young men in their 20s, spoke multiple languages, one like Arabic. I mean, languages that are not common. It wasn't like they were good Spanish speakers. They couldn't get in because too white.
Wow. Well, I hope this is corrected before the military is called upon to do some serious defense of a national security threat, and they're unable to do so. And by the way, these people before they could steal anymore. That's why I have been saying the people at Lear are good people. They believe in America. Latest in Ukraine. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced publicly that he has given the order to invade Lebanon. So a couple of questions. How reckless is this? Would there have been CIA and MI6 input in this? Would there have been American DOD input into this before he made this announcement?
Well, Judge, if memory serves, this is about the 3rd time he said he had given that order.
Right.
I don't know how seriously to take it, right? What I do know is that his political and his personal life is at stake here. The Israelis are increasingly prone to see that in Netanyahu. And whether he goes ahead and invades Lebanon, I just don't know. Now, you make a good point. What has the Department of Defense told him about this? Well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was there last week or 10 days ago. What did he say to his fellow military there in Tel Aviv or West Jerusalem? I dare say he must have cautioned about a wider war, but it's not clear that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has much input. He reports to Austin, the Secretary of Defense, and Blinken and Sullivan are running their show. So I just don't know what to think. All I do know is that the Israelis want to provoke Iran into doing something drastic enough to get the U.S. in militarily on Israel's side. Whether they succeed in that really depends on how perspicacious the Iranians are. They're pretty darn sensible. I don't think it's going to rise to that bait. And I think that Netanyahu may not be able to achieve this partly because his military really don't want to do that either. Last thing, of course, is that all it would take is a call from Biden or Blinken or Sullivan or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying, look, don't do it. If you think that you can mousetrap us into active military involvement there, forget about it. Think again.
Alistair Crook indicated on this program earlier today that the commander of American troops in Europe, not General Cavalli, who's the commander of all NATO troops in Europe, but the general who commands American military in Europe, was physically present in Tel Aviv over the weekend. Alistair also indicates that the DoD has either stated or leaked that its two aircraft carriers can't stay there, quote, forever. How do you read, if those two statements are correct, how do you read them?
Well, the rosy view would be that our military is talking some sense into the Israelis. And I would favor that view. I mean, warning or leaking the news that these two sitting ducks out there in that area maybe not be able to stay there forever. I would think that's another indication that the military knows which end is up here. And there's a chance that they could prevail against Austin himself, Secretary of Defense, and surely against Blinken and Sullivan, unless they do something really stupid before the election.
Switching over to Ukraine, Colonel McGregor reports that the death toll in the attack on the military training academy in Poltava, Ukraine, as of this morning, was 720. Now, that to me seems like an extraordinary number for one attack. And of course, one wonders who was killed there besides these cadets and their Ukrainian and their Swedish and their Polish instructors. Does that number of dead tell you anything about the severity of the attack, the message it's sending, or the Russian progression westward?
Well, it does, Judge. The Ukrainians at last count were admitting to 51 dead and hundreds injured. So this number is quite extraordinary. It's possible because there was a sitting duck there with all these trainees out in the open, and many of them still in the barracks. So it's possible. That's a very big number. That's almost as many Swedes as lost to Peter the Great in 1709 at the Battle of Poltava, which changed the course of European history, giving the Russians a leg up and having them defeat Sweden. So you think that the Swedes ever learned these things? Anyhow, there were Swedish instructors there. We know that from emails exchanged with their relatives and so forth. So this is a dastardly thing. But more important is the fact that the battle is pretty much nearing an end in that part of Donbass. Pokrovsk, the citadel, if that falls, the way is clear all the way to the Dnieper River. As a matter of fact, there are Russian troops on the west bank of the Dnieper River down south in Kherson, nobody knows what they're doing there, but it's very clear that they have the initiative here. They're not going to stop. The question is whether they will stop out of courtesy or out of some other reason before we elect our next president on November 5th.
I know in the intelligence community, you folks are interested in ISR, in intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. How good is NATO at ISR? And wouldn't NATO have known that all their trainers and all these young cadets were sitting ducks?
Well, NATO's not all that bright. I mean, look at Stoltenberg and look at the people working from Stoltenberg, Secretary General. At last mention of him by Putin, he said, I dealt with him when he was Prime Minister of Norway, and there was not a sign of dementia back then. These people are not the sturdiest groups. They're not the sharpest knives in the drawer. And so it's quite possible that even though their intelligence surveillance and monitoring is excellent, and especially US, of course, there's no logic to the fact that they had all these people there really out in the open, many of them. And of course, that part of Ukraine is full of Russian spies, for God's sake. I mean, they're the ones that count the refrigerator trucks going to the morgue, okay? They're probably the ones who came up with that figure that Colonel McGregor is using. So, yeah, the capability is there. The ability to interpret it or to put it into kind of cogent defensive action is not there. And that's going to continue in Pokrovsk. After all, there are no reserve troops to relieve those that are trying to defend Pokrovsk, a key juncture. Okay, where are they? They're all being killed up in Kursk, where they were sent on this fool's errand. So the narrative is getting better here, but the logic, there was no military logic in sending these troops, armed and well trained as they were, into Kursk, because they're going to get killed or they're going to get driven back across the border.
Let me get back to Poltava one last time. Would Intel, using ISR, have known that these missiles were coming, or are these missiles the ones that move so fast and are so strong that nobody can stop them once they're launched?
Well, they were not short range, but they weren't the kinds of missiles you have a lot of lead time on. They should have recognized the vulnerability of this site and not let it be susceptible to this kind of thing. But I don't think they had time to warn these people. I think the sirens didn't go off until 2 minutes before, and that's an indication, to me at least, that these were perhaps not hypersonic, but very fast, maybe more than just speed of sound missiles. They're Iskander missiles, I believe, 2 of them.
Chris, play. I'm going to call in a second for cut number 9. This is the director of MI6 and the director of CIA in a very unusual environment for them. This is a little clip of what they said. I'm going to ask you, what is this all about? Number 9.
Typically audacious and bold on the part of the Ukrainians to try and change the game in a way. And I think they have, to a degree, changed the narrative around this.
The Kursk offensive is a significant tactical achievement. It's not only been a boost in Ukrainian morale, it has exposed some of the vulnerabilities of Putin's Russia and of his military.
Why were these two, who, along with their predecessors going back to the end of World War II, were never seen together in public in front of an audience that could question them?
Well, first of all, let me correct what Bill Burns just said.
Please.
Back in July, I think it was July 7th of last year, so that'd be 14 months ago, He published an article, an op-ed in the Washington Post, and he gave it to the president saying, Putin has lost already in Ukraine. His military have been exposed as inefficient to the whole world. Okay, 6 days later, President Biden said the same thing in Helsinki. Putin has already lost this war. So here you go. Here's Bill Burns. He's not an intelligence officer. He's a propagandist, and that's exactly what he's doing here. In answer to your question, yeah, the narrative changed for maybe 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe. But what was the logic of this military operation? There wasn't any. Even one of Petraeus's, General Petraeus's disciples, fellow named Lieutenant Colonel Nagel, he said right at the outset, "Oh, the narrative is changing, but there's no logic to this thing. Let's see how it works." So what happened here is if they had a chance, if they thought they had a chance, the Ukrainians, to seize that nuclear power station up there, well, that was delusional. They could never do that, but maybe that was one objective. The other objective was to, guess what? Change the narrative. And now the narrative has changed until about now when those people are being driven out or killed in course. And you wonder why they're getting together. So your question about appearing in public. Well, this is the new look. MI6, the equivalent of CIA, and the CIA director getting together, talking about the narrative, not talking about what's changing on the ground. And you know what? You wonder what they were saying to each other in private. Here's the situation. The Russians are winning, okay? I hate to break that to Americans, but the Russians are winning in Ukraine. They're going to take this key part of Ukraine called Pokrovsk, okay? And then they have free reign to go to the Dnieper River. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that something has to happen between now and the election in the United States on the 5th of November. Who's going to do that? MI6 and the CIA. What are they going to do? I don't know, but there's an even chance that something spectacular is going to happen to change the narrative before the election on November 5th. And there's precedent for this. You know, most people don't remember just 22 years ago, the head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, and George Tenet, CIA director, met at CIA headquarters on the 20th of July, 2002. Okay? This is July 2002. Everyone was saying, well, does Saddam Hussein have weapons of mass destruction? Well, they met there because Tony Blair, who had been talking to Bush and saying, you know, we're going to do this. They had agreed to do this, right? This war, but he wasn't quite sure that that Bush was really with it. So he sent his MI6 guy, Dearlove, to talk with George Tenet because George Tenet was known to know exactly what Bush was thinking. So they met on a Saturday, the 20th of July, 2002, and the outcome was revealed years later. Now, I make a point here. Dan Ellsberg would always want me to say, that was too late. If you're going to leak something like that, you leak it when it's so you can stop something.
And what was leaked? What was leaked years later?
Yeah, what was leaked was the Downing Street memorandum. Now, here's the situation. Dearlove goes to Washington, talks with Tenet on the 20th of July, 2002. On the 23rd, so my math is right, it's 3 days later, right? There's a big meeting of very high officials at Downing Street, Blair in charge, okay? So what does Dearlove do? He briefs them and he says, now, there's going to be a war. Bush has decided to be a war. That's what Tenet tells me. And the intelligence and the facts are going to be fixed around the policy. Right. That's a direct quote, okay? And then Straw, the foreign minister, Jack Straw, said, well, you know, this is going to be an uphill battle because Saddam Hussein is not threatening his neighbors. And besides, he doesn't have as many WMD as Libya or North Korea or other. So, we're going to have, this is going to be tough to sell. And Dearlove says, look, this is the way it is. It will be justified by the conjunction of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. In other words, we'll say there are weapons of mass destruction there. They're going to be given to terrorists. We're going to go ahead with this. Now, that was July 2002. It wasn't until a month or two later that Bob Graham, head of the Senate, was asking, hey, can we have an estimate on this? Looks like you guys want to do a war. Can we have a national intelligence estimate on this? And George Tenet said, no, we're too busy. So Dick Durbin from Illinois, he says, look, Bob, just tell them no intelligence estimate, no war, no permission for war. And so that's what Bob Graham did. That's why you got the fraudulent intelligence estimate of October 1st, 2002, which said, all these things and were the basis of Colin Powell's fraudulent remarks. So that's how you get to say, you decide in the spring with Tony Blair, then you get your intelligence, your agencies together, and then they justify it by the conjunction
But
of
have these intelligence agencies ever been engaged in public propaganda the way they are today? Example, the head of MI6 2 days ago, Chris, cut number 10.
And it's important to remember how this started. This started in this phase with Putin mounting a war of aggression in February 2022. And 2.5 years later, that failed. It continues to fail. The Ukrainians will continue to fight. We will continue to help them to fight. And it's difficult.
This is utter rubbish that Putin has failed. Chris has put together a montage of American officials, Biden, Blinken, Austin, Sullivan, saying Putin has failed, Putin has failed, Putin has failed. Ukraine's about to collapse. How can MI6 stand in front of an international audience on international television next to the head of CIA and tell a lie like that Putin has failed?
Well, he's instructed to do that. It's part of the imperial outreach. The intelligence services do what they're told, and they get away with it. Now, what happened to Sir Richard Dearlove? He became head of one of the most prominent colleges at Cambridge, right? What happened to Jack Straw, foreign minister? Same thing. They get, what do they call them? They get to be sirs. They're benighted before the war, and then they get knighted after the war for services performed. It's totally corrupt, Judge. And my concern, as you well know, is what happens during these next 2 months, because the narrative, they can maybe change that, but they can't change the situation on the ground. And as we've said, this could be a definitive defeat before the election. What are Blinken and Sullivan going to try to do with the help of MI6 and CIA to prevent that? I don't know, but I have some ideas.
What are your ideas?
Well, false flag attacks come first and foremost. The Ukrainians have 3 nuclear power plants. They could be attacked and with disastrous consequences and blamed on the Russians, of course. There are lots of things that can enhance the narrative on the ground. They're all faux things. They're all fraudulent things, but they can be done. And let's face it, Sullivan, Blinken, Biden, they're all in danger of losing the war, losing the election, and if this other fellow comes through, losing their freedom.
Ray McGovern, thank you, my dear friend. Very much appreciated. Appreciate your
Today, we're going to dive into Turkey's bold step to join the BRICS group and what it means for its role in the world. We'll chat about why Turkey is making this move, what it hopes to gain, and how it could shake up its relationships with both Eastern and Western countries. Plus, we'll look at the challenges Turkey might face as it takes this new path, and what it could mean for global politics in the future. Get ready to find out how Turkey's strategic choices could redefine its influence and what this means for international alliances going forward. But before we get into the details, hit that like button and subscribe to Tech Revolution. We're all about bringing you the latest and greatest updates so you don't want to miss out. All right, let's get right into it. Turkey has officially applied to join the BRICS group, which could really shake things up for its role on the global stage. This decision comes at a time when many countries are switching up their alliances. Let's take a closer look at what this means for Turkey, its goals, and how it could impact global politics. Think of it like waiting in a long line to get into a club that never seems to let anyone in. That's how Turkey has felt about trying to join the European Union, EU. Since 2005, Turkey has been working hard to become a member, but it has faced a lot of bumps along the way. Issues like democracy problems, human rights concerns, and political disagreements have kept Turkey out of the club. Now, with its application to join BRICS, Turkey is changing its game plan. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his team believe that the world is moving away from just relying on developed countries. They see a chance to build connections in a world where countries can team up with multiple partners instead of just focusing on the West. This shift isn't just about being frustrated with the EU, it's about seizing new opportunities. The BRICS group, which includes key emerging economies, gives Turkey a chance to boost its global presence. By teaming up with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, Turkey wants to expand its foreign relations and reduce its reliance on Western alliances. So, why is Turkey jumping into BRICS right now? It's really about wanting to have more influence on the world stage. By joining BRICS, Turkey is looking to connect better with countries outside of its usual Western allies. Erdogan has been saying that it's important to balance relationships with both Eastern and Western nations. He believes that Turkey can be a strong, prosperous, and effective country by building ties with everyone. When it comes to the economy, this move could be a big deal. Turkey wants to work more closely with major players like Russia and China. For example, Turkey has already established strong trade ties with China, which has become one of its biggest trading partners. In 2021, trade between Turkey and China hit about $37 billion, showing there's a lot of potential for even more cooperation. By joining BRICS, Turkey hopes to act as a trade bridge between the EU and Asia, tapping into those growing markets. This could open up new opportunities for Turkish businesses. The BRICS New Development Bank, NDB, could provide crucial funding for infrastructure projects and other initiatives, helping Turkey improve its economic stability and growth. The NDB has already approved over $30 billion in loans for various projects in member countries. Plus, Turkey's application comes at a time when tensions are rising with NATO allies. After keeping close ties with Russia during its conflict with Ukraine in 2022, it found itself at odds with some NATO members. Joining BRICS could give Turkey alternative partnerships that fit better with its current foreign policy goals. All right, let's dive into BRICS. This group is made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And a lot of people see it as a way to balance out those Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. Recently, they welcomed 4 new members: Iran, the UAE, Ethiopia, and Egypt. This growth shows that emerging economies are really eager to make their mark on the world stage. For Turkey, joining BRICS is a huge opportunity. It means getting access to funding and broader political and trade connections. The BRICS Development Bank could provide some important financial support for infrastructure projects and other initiatives. This backing could really help Turkey boost its economic stability and growth. For example, the NDB has funded projects in renewable energy, transportation, and agriculture, areas where Turkey has a ton of potential. Plus, BRICS countries are working more closely together on trade, investment, and technology. In 2021, BRICS nations made up about 40% of the world's population and around 25% of global GDP. That's some serious collective strength. Turkey's membership could also amp up energy cooperation. With its strategic location, Turkey could become an important energy hub, linking suppliers from the east with consumers in the west. This role could enhance Turkey's importance in global politics and strengthen its economy. For instance, Turkey is working on the Trans-Anatolian Natural Gas Pipeline, TANAP, which aims to transport gas from Azerbaijan to Europe, further solidifying its position as an energy corridor. Erdogan has a clear vision for Turkey's future. He really believes that the country can do well by building good relationships with both Eastern and Western powers. He's even said, "Any method other than this will not benefit Turkey, but will harm it." This shows how committed he is to a foreign policy that balances different alliances. On top of BRICS, Erdogan is also looking to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, which is kind of seen as a rival to NATO. The SCO includes countries like China, Russia, and India, and it focuses on regional security and working together economically. By aiming to be part of both BRICS and the SCO, Turkey is making it clear that it wants to be a big player in global discussions. Erdogan is also calling for reforms in the United Nations Security Council, pushing for better representation for countries. He argues that the current setup doesn't really reflect what's happening today, and that emerging economies should have a stronger voice in global governance. This push for reform fits right in with Turkey's goal of boosting its diplomatic influence. Looking ahead, the upcoming BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, from October 22nd to 24th, is going to be a big deal for Turkey. This summit could be a great chance for the country to chat more about joining the group. Other countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Azerbaijan are also eyeing BRICS membership, so the competition is pretty tough. Even though Turkey is pushing hard for BRICS membership, it hasn't given up on its EU dreams. Turkey's foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, has made it clear that joining the EU is still a key goal for the country. Recently, it has been trying to kickstart its EU membership talks after a 5-year break. This two-pronged approach shows that they want to keep its Western ties strong while also exploring new opportunities with BRICS. But there are some challenges ahead. Turkey is facing some tough domestic issues, like economic instability and political divisions, which could affect its ability to build these new alliances. The Turkish lira took a big hit, losing about 50% of its value against the US dollar in 2021, leading to skyrocketing inflation that topped 70% in 2022. Tackling these problems will be super important for them to make the most of its new foreign policy direction. Plus, Turkey's relationships with BRICS countries aren't always smooth sailing. For instance, while it has been strengthening its ties with Russia, it has also found itself in tricky spots, like supporting Ukraine. Balancing these relationships will require some careful diplomacy. Turkey's push to join BRICS is a big change in its foreign policy. By seeking new alliances and mixing up its partnerships, it's positioning itself to play a more influential role in the world. As the global landscape keeps shifting, Turkey's moves could have lasting effects on its own situation and its relationships with other countries. What do you think Turkey's move to join BRICS means for its future? Do you see it as a
Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. Hey, we have special guests with us. Keaton Weiss and Russell Dobler are the hosts of Do Dissident Show on YouTube, Rumble, and Substack. You know them, you love them. Hello, fellas.
Hello, Jimmy. Pleasure to be here, though. This kind of kills the fan theory that me and Matt Walsh are the same person. People have speculated that in the past.
So
and
that's
now,
gone out the window.
Now it's out the window. Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw this. I wanted to play it for both of you before we get to the real reason I brought you on. In 2020, Ice Cube said, withhold your vote until they give you something, which is what I've said about Hillary Clinton. I said, come get my vote. I said that about Joe Biden. Come get my vote. That's how politics works. You don't get to just shame me into voting for you because someone else is worse. You have to come get my vote. And so that's what he's basically getting. So he said it back then and they gave him a hard time. And then here we go. He's doing it again.
Process. You don't vote just to vote. You vote because you're getting something or your community is getting something. So everybody that's telling you that, man, look at them and say, what are you getting? Because people that just want you to vote and not ask for nothing, people that's in power that want you to vote but don't want you to get anything or not asking for you to get anything economically, they suspect, straight up. Because a lot of people been in place for a long time and we ain't got shit. That's a fact. That shit gonna end. That shit gonna end. We gonna get what we supposed to get. Period. And anybody asking you not to ask, I wouldn't listen to them. Because that's the process. Every community asks for what they want. And we're going to do the same goddamn thing.
I don't know what planet
Anybody telling you that you got to vote, that it's your duty, that you have to exercise the right, and that people died for you to vote. For one, people did die, but nobody walked out their house to go die for you to vote. They were killed by probably some racists that don't want to see us get anything. Be skeptical of anybody telling you to vote and not telling you to ask for anything or to tell you to just vote and not to get anything for your vote. That's not how it works.
So I don't know what planet he's from, but here in America, we vote for whoever our peers pressured us into voting for, just to keep them as friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have time for purity tests and making us think about our decision. That hurts. And our psychologist tells us we need to stop doing things that hurt ourselves.
Apparently, he has not heard that the arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. And you just have to vote harder. And you just have to wait. Also, I don't know what cave he's living in, but apparently he's not heard that Orange Man bad.
He has not heard that. But you know what was interesting to me is, first of all, he's echoing what Lawrence O'Donnell said before he got his job at MSNBC. You remember what he said before he got his job at MSNBC? He's saying exactly what Ice Cube has been saying the last two election cycles. So here it is.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them. If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to go.
So that is fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell before they pulled him aside, roughed him up, traumatized him to the point where he'll never utter that truth ever again. He'll never say that on his show ever again. But that's what he was saying. That's all he's saying. And when he said it online on Twitter, immediately this got almost 2,000 likes. They said Ice Cube is in business partners with Steve Bannon, a known fraudster who is currently in jail for frauding. And when he got out in November, will go back to jail for more frauding. Nothing else to say is. So you're not speaking to his point, isn't that? So that just seems like I don't know.
That's all they do.
So are you saying that he's wrong to tell his community to ask for something for his vote? And it got 2,000 likes almost. You're saying don't ever ask for anything for your vote? Why don't you speak to what his point is instead of just doing character assassination? I know, because his point is right, and you don't want to address that. Because Kamala Harris isn't going to give anything to his people. Go ahead.
I mean, people play this weird psychological game where on the one hand, they'll say, look, don't take it so seriously. Voting is not an expression of your inner soul. It's just a choice you make on election day. You say, okay, well, then my choice on election day is not to vote for either of them. Well, what do you mean? You have to pick one. You have to pick one. It's your duty to pick one. It's like, it's like they don't have their story straight. What did George Carlin say?
Trump.
He said, people like to say people who don't vote have no right to complain. He said, I think it's the exact opposite. I think people who don't vote are the only ones who have a right to complain, because when whoever you voted for does something horrible, I can say, look, I had nothing to do with it. I think the default should be not to participate and only vote for someone if they give you a reason to, because mathematically voting is like the most inefficient expression of political sentiment. I mean, you're one in 300 million votes. So unless you really feel like you're going out and voting for something, I think it's your choice not to do it. People didn't die for your right to vote. They died for your right to choose whether or not to vote. Freedom of participation is freedom to decide whether or not to participate at all. And so, all the self-righteous virtue signaling about voting and who you have to vote for, it just seems to be deployed for convenience, depending on the time.
Well, here's a video you got in Chicago. Here's a black guy, ex-con, who says he's voting for Trump. Here we are.
All right,
Yes.
So you support Trump?
Yes, I support the office.
And you also support Palestine?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
Trump doesn't, though, right?
I don't have nothing to do with that. I'm against the Democratic Party. It don't matter if it was Mickey Mouse in the office or Republican office. I'm voting for Mickey Mouse. So it's not about the personality. His issues, not my issues.
Okay, but if you support Palestine, do you not like that he supports Israel?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're choosing to look past it, basically.
That's I've been dealing with this Democratic Party that's caused disinvestment to our community for 60 years. So it's time to get rid of them. So if it could be the devil in office, I'm voting for him against that devil over there.
Okay, do you actually like Trump, or you just like him better than the Democrats?
I want Trump to dislike Trump. That's the problem with human beings. You dislike people you don't even know. And that's the problem with racism. That's the problem with sexism. That's the problem with all those things. So, it's not about who's in office and who's sitting in office. Look who's sitting in office now. The Democrats. So who you gonna pick? Who you gonna pick? Which devil you picking?
All right, so you don't feel like because Kamala Harris is a black woman that you have to support her?
What's she black at?
You don't feel she is?
She's not. She's not for us. You know how many black people Obama was so-called black. Look at our communities in Chicago. And this is his city.
Do you feel Trump did better for those communities?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
In what way?
Clinton 94 crime bill ushered us into prison. Trump's second step has released 50,000 of men that the Clinton crime bill over sentenced. So everybody, even a clock is right a broken clock is right twice a day. So it's always good and bad. You can find that in both.
So just to let you know, Republican Donald Trump's 12% share of the black vote in 2020 was 4 percentage points higher than it was in 2016. And I've seen where it's been up to 22%. And the Reuters found that in July, 18% of Black Americans would pick Trump over Biden in a hypothetical matchup, compared to 46% who favored Biden, including about 1 in 4 Black men, compared to about 1 in 7 Black women. So I can't believe that Bernie Sanders, we went from half the Democratic primary voting in 2016 of the voters choosing to overthrow the Democratic establishment and get corporate money out of the party. And those people are all gone now. They don't ever, Bernie, he trained them to not ask for anything for their vote. And they don't. That's what this is. And then when someone does, he's looked at as a pariah.
Well, this,
go ahead.
Yeah, this is what Democrats really can't reckon with. You know, Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, she wrote an article, and you can look it up. It's still online. Why Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the black vote. She wrote that in 2016. And one of the pictures in it is a picture of how Bill Clinton announced his campaign in 92. He announced it at the birthplace of the KKK at the Stone Mountain Correctional Facility with a phalanx of black prisoners in chains behind him. And if that didn't communicate the message clearly enough, he took the picture with Cooter from the Dukes of Hazzard standing next to him, who at that time was actually a congressman. Now, I have challenged Democrats in every election. If you can give me a credible, non-racist explanation for why Bill Clinton announced his campaign that way, I promise I will vote for the Democrat for president. If you can give me a credible, reasonable, non-racist explanation for that. And nobody has ever even attempted to decipher that as a non-racist picture. Democrats cannot face the fact that in the end, not because they're necessarily more racist, but because their political calculations are different, the Democrats, the modern Democrats, have done more damage to the black community by orders of magnitude than the Republicans have. Because for them, they view the black community as a community that's captive and that has nowhere to go. So they can do whatever they want to the black community. In the end, they've always believed they'll still get the black vote. The Republicans are coming at elections with a very different calculus. All they need to do is peel away a few percentage points of the black vote, and they win. They're unbeatable. So for them, they are motivated to actually try to win over that community. Whereas the Democrats are looking at white people in the suburbs who want to see them get tough on crime. Look at Kamala. Look at Kamala. They're leaning into her record as a tough prosecutor because they assume they have the black vote on lock. They're always concerned about white people in the suburbs who will put BLM signs on their front lawns all day, but like to know that the police are out there cracking heads. And that's the dance, that's the game that they've always played.
Well, that's the game. But if you look at those numbers, Jimmy, that you just put up on the screen about how the Republicans have made these inroads with black voters, it's true. They have. 2020, they got 12% of the black vote. That should have spelt doom for Joe Biden. And, you know, if Trump is due to get within, 15 to 20% of the black vote this time, which I think is certainly doable, that should spell doom for the Democrats. What has kept the Democrats in the game, though, is that their base has gotten so much richer and so much whiter that they have been able to trade it to such a point where that it keeps them in the game. Like they really have swapped bases to such a large extent. This is the ultimate irony. The Democrats have always, thought of Trump as this spearhead of white nationalism, of a white nationalist movement. But as Trump and Trumpism have come to define the Republican Party has become more diverse and the Democratic Party has become whiter. Right.
Here's the kicker.
In 1864.
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. Okay. In 1864, he said because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to
have
add,
to weigh in
but Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh in.
speaking.
Yeah,
You
So
can have
I
15 more
wanna-
seconds and then.
Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait,
I'm speaking.
be important if you said the truth.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President. I'm
Weigh in.
speaking. Yeah, I'm about to.
Hey, welcome back. It's your man Wise. It looks like the ABC debate is actually going to happen. So get your popcorn ready, as my guy T.O. would say. Kamala has allegedly agreed to the rules for the ABC debate against Trump next week, but not without throwing a little pity party first. Her campaign couldn't resist taking a swipe, saying that Vice President Harris, a former prosecutor, will be fundamentally disadvantaged by this format, which will serve to shield Donald Trump from direct exchanges with the vice president. Cut it out. They're already making excuses before the debate has even started. I mean, come on. This is the same format Trump and Biden used before, but now all of a sudden it's somehow unfair. This is also the format that her campaign asked for previously. These people are ridiculous. She's trying to claim she's at a disadvantage. But let's keep it a buck. We all know what she really wanted. She wanted the chance to interrupt Trump on that stage so she could have her viral gotcha clip, just like what we seen with Mike Pence.
I'm speaking.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking. Well, it looks like she's not going to get it.
In about a week, it's going to be on September the 10th. And Kamala Harris is heading to Pittsburgh to so-called debate camp where she's going to be hunkered down. It's going to be televised by ABC and then simulcast as well. And we'd heard that she was trying to make sure that all the mics were open.
Yes.
Ultimately, they decided both sides the mics would be muted. So these are the ground rules, essentially. The microphones will be muted except when the candidate who's speaking is speaking, and immediately then it goes off. No live audience to cheer for either side. There will be a pen, paper, and a bottle of water at the lectern. You can't take notes. There will be 2-minute answers.
No
to
pre-written
questions.
notes, but you can take notes on the fly.
Yeah, sure, but you can't take any in. 2-minute rebuttals and a 1-minute extra minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. So pretty much what we have seen in the past.
Yes. Wasn't it Biden's team that requested the muted mics in the first place? So why the change? And now Kamala, she's had the chance to debate Trump 3 times this election season, but she declined and said she'd stick to this one only. Now, suddenly she sees trying to flip the rules and expects him to roll over and comply. Yeah, good luck with that. You can already see she's scared out of her mind. Kamala will be unburdened by what has been because she's terrified of what will be. The real reason she's throwing all these tantrums is that she knows Trump is going to completely steamroll her behind on that stage.
She kept looking down, up. Nobody wants to cover it. I know all about notes. I mean, it's all right if people know that, but she wasn't supposed to have notes. So she's asked a question. She looks down. She keeps on. She had notes. That means she knew that she knew what was happening.
Did her campaign, when they said that they wanted to change the rules that they had agreed to, did they ask for notes? Did they ask for
They wanted notes.
They wanted to be seated and they wanted your mic hot.
They wanted a desk. They didn't want to do. I said, you got to do a stand up.
After they already agreed to the other.
Yeah, but they wanted a desk from the beginning. You know who else wanted a desk? Sleepy Joe. He wanted a desk.
All right.
Okay. If I'm Donald Trump, I completely understand why he doesn't want to jump through all these hoops for a debate with Kamala Harris. Let's keep it real. Kamala has been crying and whining nonstop about this debate. And here's the kicker. Trump's not scared to debate. He's actually agreed to several debates already. He said yes to September 4th, September 10th, and September 17th. He's ready and willing to go head to head. He basically said, I'll show up and we can get it on anytime, anywhere. So it's not like he's dodging anyone. In fact, it was Biden who had to be pushed. And now Kamala's campaign is trying to play the victim card. So what's really happening? Kamala and her team are melting down because they tried to rig this debate and it didn't work. They demanded all of these ridiculous accommodations, like she wants notes in front of her so she doesn't forget her pre-rehearsed lines from her handlers. She asks for notes as if she can't speak off cuff without someone telling her what to say. ABC, to their credit, finally pushed back and they told her, hegs, no. They're sticking with the original rules, like the kind we've seen in previous debates. No pre-written notes, standing at podiums, and mics only turned on when it's the candidate's turn to speak. It's pretty straightforward stuff if you ask me. But of course, Kamala's campaign can't help themselves, so they keep whining about it. And ABC is giving her these small assurances. We don't know the full details, but you can bet they're trying to slip in some sneaky little changes to make Kamala feel more comfortable, and they're still crying about it.
So Politico was reporting, because we know Kamala wanted the open mics. They're reporting that her debate team has been an upheaval because they haven't gotten that. Karen Dunn, who's in charge of debate prep, is being described as morose because she wants to have this Kavanaugh-like moment where she's prosecuting the case. She did it to Mike Pence. Let me speak. But there may be some nuance to the rules. Yes, I'm speaking. MJ Lee of CNN says this. There have been some assurances offered to the Harris campaign about how the network would handle any moments of significant crosstalk. So the mics are muted, but who's the muter? Who's doing the muting? Because that guy's got a lot of power if he isn't giving assurances about crosstalk.
It could be a woman.
Could be a woman. Oh, I guess I'm biased.
Women can shut you down too.
They can.
So imagine being promised assurances. Like what? That's a huge red flag. Why is Kamala Harris's team getting these so-called assurances from the media? What does that even mean? It means exactly what you think it means. The media is working to help her out, plain and simple. You see, they were banking on those open mics so Kamala could constantly interrupt Trump and throw in those fake I'm speaking moments. But think about it. Why does her team need assurances? Rules are rules. Why the whole bending over backwards to make Kamala comfortable? They know she's going to struggle in a real fair debate, and they're doing whatever they can to help her out. So these assurances are basically the media's way of saying, don't worry, Kamala, we've got your back. We'll step in and make sure you don't get exposed. I mean, too bad. And let's be clear, this isn't the first time the media has played this game. They've been running interference for Kamala and Biden since the start of the administration. They cover for them, downplay their failures, and now they're going out of their way to protect her in this debate. And who's going to be in charge of muting the mics? It's a great freaking question.
I would say a couple of things. I remember last time that they did bring up the mic sometime in crosstalk. Yep. You'd hear a couple of words from the other candidate, and then the mic would go up. So there'll be that moment, I'm sure, of unscriptedness. The other thing was it's going to be, if we can put up those rules one more time, the ABC debate, where I think it's going to be key for the follow-ups. It's going to be the 2-minute rebuttal and extra clarification. One thing about Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, they laid out on the clarification. So I'm wondering if ABC is going to come in and say, Mr. President, Miss Vice President, Mr. President, I think you're wrong here, or that's not exactly how it went. That's when you're going to find out about the moderators. Yeah, if they're going to do that, because neither one of those anchors did last time.
Yeah, let's be real. When it comes to these debate moderators, David Muir and Lindsey Davis, we already know what to expect. These so-called clarifications are going to be aimed squarely at Trump, not at Harris. That's probably what those assurances are really about. Let's see if under the guise of clarifying, they'll basically only fact-check Trump right in the middle of the debate. We've seen this before. Whenever Trump gets on a roll or makes a powerful point, they'll stop the momentum with some scripted fact check that they've been sitting on, ready to throw at him. They'll phrase it like, actually, Mr. President, that's not exactly how it went. And boom, the whole flow of the debate shifts. But notice what won't happen. They're not going to hit Harris with those same clarifications. You think these ABC moderators are going to call her out when she dodges a question or, plays, extremely loose with the facts? It remains to be seen. But of course, Kamala's out here acting like she's the only one ready for a real debate. Take a look at this clip.
So many of you have been asking me
about the debate, and I'll tell you, I'm ready to debate Donald Trump. I have agreed to the previously agreed upon September 10th debate. He agreed to that previously. Now it appears he's backpedaling, but I'm ready. And I think the voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race on a debate stage. And so I'm ready. Let's go.
Will you do it on Fox News? Comment on the protest yesterday.
Well, we hope that there is at least one debate, maybe two debates. We would be very happy to participate.
And there you have it. Kamala says she's ready to debate Trump, but notice how she conveniently refuses to commit to the Fox debate. Why? Because she doesn't want to be in an environment where she's actually challenged. She's sticking to the ABC debate where the moderators will be sure to cover for her every time she gets backed into a corner. And now she's out here trying to claim that Trump is backpedaling. I mean, come on, man. It's completely laughable when you look at her track record. She's had the chance to debate Trump multiple times, but passed on all of them. This whole charade is just a way for Kamala to avoid real scrutiny. So when Kamala says she's ready, what she really means is that she's hoping ABC will do their job and protect her. But anyway, guys, this is where we stand on this upcoming debate. I want to hear what you
Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Fox News contributor and the Federalist editor-in-chief, Molly Hemingway, and Fox News national correspondent, Griff Jenkins. Well, we begin with brand new polling showing former President Trump pulling ahead of Vice President Kamala Harris. Maybe a sign that her momentum has stalled. New York Times Siena College poll shows Trump leading Harris by 1 point in this super tight race. And the new polls show Trump also remains popular with a 46% approval rating. That's big. Better than where he stood in either of his last two presidential campaigns. And this poll is being called one of Trump's most overlooked advantages. Voters see Trump as closer to the center than Harris. And nearly half of all voters say that Harris is too liberal or progressive. That explains all of her flip-flopping. Those policies, they simply won't get her to the White House. But just ask Bernie Sanders. He seems to know this.
You have described Vice President Kamala Harris as a progressive. She has previously supported Medicare for all. Now she does not. She's previously supported a ban on fracking. Now she does not. These, Senator, are ideas that you have campaigned on. Do you think that she is abandoning her progressive ideals?
No, I don't think she's abandoning her ideals. I think she's trying to be pragmatic and doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election.
Republicans everywhere rejoiced with that soundbite. Look, Molly, this reminded me of the Etch-a-Sketch comment from the senior advisor to the Romney campaign, where he said a general election campaign is an Etch-a-Sketch. You shake it up and you change everything. And he got widely derided for that. That is essentially the same thing. He's saying she's still liberal progressive. She's just hiding it. And it bears asking all of the American public, does she still support all of this? We'll scroll at her 2019 policies. Medicare for all, banning fracking, the list goes on. Medicare, Green New Deal, an extreme list.
Well, first off, I think it's worth pointing out that she hasn't actually changed her positions on anything according to her own speaking. She's had anonymous sources in her campaign come out to compliant reporters and claim she has changed her long-held, consistently held positions from when she was Attorney General of California, when she was senator, when she was running for vice president, or even as vice president. So she's got a lot of consistency. But it is true that she's willing to say almost anything to get elected. And my favorite example of this is actually back in 2020, when in the Democrat primary debate, you might recall, she called President Biden a horrific racist. She was asked about it on a late night show later, and she said, they were like, why would you be on the same ticket as someone who you said was this horrible person? And she kept saying, it was just a debate. So she has this track record of being willing to say whatever is needed, but I think voters should probably look at what her actual policies have been over the course of the election.
And to that end, Emily, she finally put up a policy page on her website. But if you were wanting specifics, you just don't get them. For example, when she talks about environmental justice. She doesn't talk about fracking. When she talks about the border, she doesn't mention decriminalizing border crossings. Now, she's flip-flopped verbally, but why not commit to that on your website?
Well, because I think, frankly, the campaign and she lack the intellectual depth to do so. Frankly, I think she couldn't have that conversation honestly in any type of detail, nor clearly can her campaign, because all that they have focused on, to Molly's point, is redefining her in soundbite increments that will resonate with young voters and people whose votes can be bought. But the reality is that most people feel they can't be bought, because right now they can't even buy groceries. They can't buy baby formula. They remember back to the horrific things we've suffered under this administration and those that she has promised. So I think moving forward, what these polls show are that race to define her, that her campaign is losing. And it's therefore incumbent upon the Trump campaign to fill in the gap. As she talks about environmental justice, to say, well, we don't know what that means, but here we're going to talk to you about conservation. And here's what that means. Here's what that looks like. Here's the indigenous tribes that agree with us. You know, they need to fill in those gaps that her talking points aim to call in with people, but it's ineffective because it's based on nothing. So to me, this just shows her entire situation is fractured.
Well, you mentioned Trump, and Griff, if I'm the Trump campaign, I'm feeling really good this morning, not just because of this New York Times Siena poll, but I was digging through some of the numbers on Real Clear Politics. And I want to put this up. This is where nationally Real Clear Politics stands. You'll see there Harris has a 1.4% advantage, but compare that to Biden. 7.5% advantage. Compare that to Hillary, 2.7% advantage. Flip to Pennsylvania, where it is a tie. Look at the advantage. She's running behind Biden by 4.5 points. She's running behind Clinton by 6.5 points. She's not standing up to the numbers her predecessors put up.
Well, that's a great point, Kaylee. And there's a lot to be excited about if you're the Trump campaign. But I think the thing that they may also be happy about is that across this polling in the New York Times, is that Americans don't know who she is. Is she the progressive liberal that espoused all those things in 2019 in the primary? Is she the centrist? Bernie Sanders perhaps said the quiet part out loud there. Her values haven't changed, by the way. That's the only thing she said in one interview she's done since she became the nominee. But when you look into that poll, 28% said they needed to know more about her, compared to only 9% said they needed to know more about Trump, which means they don't really know where she stands. As you point out, that policy page is as vague as can be. There's no real specifics to dig into. And I think the most damning number in that poll, by the way, is 56% of voters said that Harris does not represent major change. So she tried to separate herself from any specifics to not nail her down, to be the candidate of change. And yet now more than half of the voters in that poll say, we don't see her as a change candidate.
You know, I see so much irony in what you're saying. So Donald Trump now is the candidate for change. And the change is what he had that was working. The change is what people have already seen. And that's ironic, because usually people want you to imagine what it would be like if it were them. And that's what she's trying to do. You don't really have to imagine with him. You can hate the posts and the tweets and blah, 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 blah. But you got to love those gas prices. You got to love those food prices. You got to love a guy who's got a plan for tackling inflation that actually is about tackling inflation.
And to that point, 51% in that same poll did see Trump as major change candidate.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Change to what worked. Real quickly, you had that scroll on before, and I caught it, the very first item, starting ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, from scratch. This from a woman who failed at the border. You want her to take one of the infrastructures of keeping us safe in America, the Customs Enforcement Department, and we can have all sorts of talks and arguments about how much stronger they need to be, especially right now with millions of illegal immigrants unaccounted for, particularly children in this country, and potential sex trafficking victims there. But the bottom line is that who you want, starting something from scratch that has something to do with national security? And where is she on foreign policy? That's another one of those rails that affects national security. I don't think, and look, maybe she can cook. She's been talking a lot about food. Keep your cooking from scratch in the kitchen for all of us, because I wouldn't be doing it either. I'm not the Harris who's running either. But come on, we need somebody who can tell us, articulate exactly what it's going to look like, not build customs enforcement from scratch.
Yeah, Molly, I do want to pull up that change number that's been mentioned repeatedly. And you see it here. So more than 60% of voters want change, and only 25% say Harris represents the change. 53% say Trump does. The reason I want to focus on this is because look, run away from the Biden legacy. If I'm Kamala Harris, my job on that stage is not to create a legacy for Biden that doesn't exist. It's to win an election. And that means saying, I stood up to him here, I stood up to him there.
Yeah.
This is where he is wrong. It means being tough. I don't think she could do that.
Well, I mean, she's got a very difficult situation here with this debate that she's going into. She has to run against everything she's ever said or done as an elected official. She's also got to run against her current administration. She's the incumbent. And that effort that has definitely been made to sort of bamboozle the American public into thinking she's not the incumbent has clearly failed, probably because the American people are not stupid. And then she also has to run against Donald Trump. I think we really can't understate how dramatic these New York Times poll results are. You know, you pointed out what was happening 4 years ago. This New York Times Siena poll 4 years ago had Biden up 8 points. She's down 1. I mean, that's a 9-point spread. And you remember 2016 and 2020 were essentially tied elections. One that Trump narrowly won and one that Trump narrowly lost. If she's running 8 points behind her predecessor, that's extremely bad news and explains why Democrats are in a bit of panic mode today.
Yeah.
Trump wants to jail election workers. Madam Vice President, do you have a reaction?
Madam Vice President, how will you handle it on the debate stage if Trump decides to launch a personal attack?
Are you ready, Madam Vice President?
If Trump decides to let Trump personal attack, shut up.
Kamala Harris is already panicking days before the debate because we all know she really doesn't want to be in this position. Come on now. We know this. And to make matters worse, the second most respected poll came out today in favor of Trump. So we'll take a look at that as well, and how her campaign has been crying over the debate rules.
I already know Trump.
Watch.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Ian Sams, senior national spokesman for the Harris-Walz campaign and a former White House staffer. Ian, thanks so much for being with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
We are going to talk policy, of course, but I have to start with Tuesday's all-important debate. We have learned now that the rules are set. The microphones will be turned off when the other person is speaking. We know that that's not what you guys were pushing for. So tell me what your reaction is to this.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing. I think the vice president really felt strongly about having the microphones unmuted so that the American people could see a real debate with real exchanges between the two candidates back and forth. I think you think about the sort of viral moments of her that people remember from her time in the Senate, where Trump appointees were before the Judiciary Committee, the way she's incisive in her questioning, asking them to draw out the truth and the facts about what they are talking about. Having that taken away from her in this debate is a challenge. And I think, we wish that the Trump campaign had understood that these are two different candidates than there were a few months ago. And that it was very clear that the Trump campaign wanted to keep a muzzle on their candidate so that they could try to instill some discipline. I think they were worried about what might happen in those exchanges with the vice president. And we're trying to sort of keep him under control. And I think, look, to their point, it's probably good for them. It's probably helpful. It's going to help Donald Trump stay under control and calmer and more disciplined and restrained. In June, for example, in the debate, he lied over and over again, but maybe he seemed a little bit more normal because he couldn't be interrupting and interjecting all the time. And so, look, this is a guy who's a showman. I think he knows how to perform in debates like this. I think he knows how to get ready for the big lights on TV. And he's a very experienced debater at this point. This is his 7th general election presidential debate, which is probably the most of anybody in history. And, I think that we're looking to see that they're probably ready to have him seem a little bit more restrained and normal for the country.
All right. You guys remember Ian Sams. He's an ultimate clown and puppet for her campaign. We know this. How could you be crying about this debate when you were offered 3, but you only accepted 1 debate? Remember, you were offered Fox News, right? You were offered NBC, but you guys declined those. So I don't want to hear you bitch about these rules when you could have went with no mics muted on Fox News. Oh yeah, that's right. They're not going to play the propaganda game for you guys. Got it. So these rules are very clear, 90 minutes. So that is a good duration. No opening statements. I like that. Just get right into it. 2 minutes for closing statements. Now, they did report that Trump will have the last word. So that's great. No props or notes. That's good as well. And there will be no audience. You don't see anybody from the Trump campaign going on the news and complaining, even though these rules don't necessarily favor Trump either, because think about it. He also benefits from mics being unmuted because he can get clips that are viral, right? So, both of these candidates, in a sense, are muzzled, which leads me to my first point about them crying about this debate. Understand something. When Kamala Harris is the person asking the questions like she was when she was a senator, she's great. She sounds just like everybody else in Congress. But when she's on the other end where she's being pressured to answer questions, that's when things melt down for her. And that's why they don't like these debate rules. So let's just call it what it is. She doesn't want to be here. This isn't who she is. And she'd rather be doing other things.
I hear you trying to lower expectations. Is there a reason you're doing that?
It's interesting, this lowering expectations question. I mean, Donald Trump is in Sean Hannity's town hall in Pennsylvania attacking ABC, claiming conspiracy theories about we're going to get the questions ahead of time. And, people aren't really talking about that as Donald Trump lowering expectations.
Well, to be fair, we are talking about that too. But since I'm interviewing you, I just want to put the question to you. Why are you lowering expectations?
I'm just telling the truth. I think it's a little bit dispiriting that the mute button is going to be on for the debate and prevent the candidates from being able to go back and forth. But look, regardless of that, the vice president is going to come to the debate ready to talk about the choice in the election, the choice between his economic vision and her.
Oh, they so mad she won't be able to say, I'm talking, Mr. President. I'm the one talking. I'm the one acting all crazy. They pissed.
Economic vision. Trickle down and big corporations and big billionaires getting tax cuts, help for small business and working people. She's going to paint the choice of the vision. She's going to talk about how we can turn the page on Donald Trump and move into the future with a new way forward for the country. Those are things she's going to be ready to talk about. She's excited to be able to do that. I think that it's just a matter of, as we talk about the rules, talking about some of the unfortunate decisions, I think, that were made to continue pushing for the muted microphones by the Trump campaign.
Man, he just won't let up on the muted mics, right? I mean, he kind of shows you they are panicking because that does not work in her favor, clearly. We know why. She wants to have a viral moment where she looks like she is the better person, the bigger person. And that is what she did with Mike Pence. Now, in my opinion, Mike Pence is a shitty debater. This guy, I don't think you will ever see Mike Pence yell ever in his life. I mean, this guy is calm as a mouse.
Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000
He said he's
a
going
year.
to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he
tax
only
bill-
cutting? Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation. Okay?
Please.
Okay.
I think her clip with him was more about him and less about her, but that's just obviously speaking about the past. Now, in the present moment here, she obviously wants to recreate that, but this is not Mike Pence. This is Donald J. Trump, okay? So he's the king of viral moments, and I don't think she wants to smoke.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Now, that's just my personal opinion. I think her campaign is looking at this incorrectly. They should be complaining about notes and no teleprompter. I think those are things that would give her an advantage over Trump, clearly, because that's when she seems to be her best, when she can look at what she's going to say and she doesn't have to say anything off script. Now, before we get to this poll that really spells bad news for Kamala Harris, We have a couple of reactions to go through, and one is from Fox News Sunday, where I think they do a great job of laying out the truth about the debate between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Watch.
Well, we know how much is at stake. The New York Times today has brand new polling saying this. The national poll of likely voters found Mr. Trump leading Ms. Harris 48 to 47%. The new poll underscores the risks and potential rewards, particularly facing Ms. Harris on Tuesday night when she and Trump face off. I mean, Guy, it couldn't be any closer.
Tight race. Trump now slightly back in the lead. So that big bounce she got in the New York Times poll from the month-long euphoria fueled by the media seems to have dissipated significantly. And Shannon, I think the most significant data point within that poll is a question about, Jim Messina was just talking about the future, the change question. A vast majority of Americans in this poll say they want change. Mm-hmm. And in this survey, a majority see Donald Trump as an agent of change and a majority see her as more of the same. That should be Trump's overarching hammered point on Tuesday night.
You know, nothing more frustrating to the Democrats than the fact that they feel that Biden and Harris do not get the credit they really deserve on the economy we have. We see a little bit of brightening of views, but the fact is in the New York Times Siena poll and in the USA Today Suffolk poll, Trump continues to be preferred when it comes to handling the economy. The change question is important. The who do you trust more to handle the economy? That is a crucial, basic question, too.
Prices are up 20% under Biden and Harris. That's why the frustration is there, because the frustration is deserved. Prices are up 20%. People feel that.
Okay, so two main points here that Trump needs to focus on in the debate, and they pointed out very well. Number one is definitely the economy, because there's nothing she could really say in regards to that. Now, what I believe she probably will say is what these Democrats have been saying, which is, well, wait a minute, we actually fixed the economy. Inflation is at an all-time low. We've added more jobs. That's gaslighting Americans, because the reality on the ground is no one feels that way. And there is a poll, like I stated, that backs that up. So the first thing is the economy. Now, the second thing is immigration. There's nothing to debate on that either, because at the end of the day, she could try to blame him because the border bill wasn't passed. Remember, that border bill was put forth this year, not last year and not the year before that. This year, the year of the election. Okay. What have you guys been doing over the last 2 to 3 years? What about when you guys first came into office? You guys rolled back every single executive order that Trump had in regards to immigration. So if he presses her on that, obviously, that will be good. Now, we have to understand something. This debate is not going to be them going back and forth with each other as much, because the mics are muted and they're not allowed to ask each other questions. So they have to basically answer the questions from the moderator. So we'll see how effective that really is. Now, let's dive into the New York Times Siena poll that really shows bad news for Kamala Harris. Okay, so one of the most important questions that was in this poll is this. Do you think Kamala, which is funny how they, spell out the way you're supposed to pronounce it, I guess, whatever, Harris represents change or more of the same? And is that a major change or a minor change? And so when you see major change, she only comes in at 25%. Okay, that's a problem already. Minor change, she only comes in at 15%. Now, here's the big eye opener. Or does she represent more of the same? 56% of people who responded to the poll said that she represents Joe Biden. That's really what they're saying. More of what's happened over the last 3.5 years. So on that front, Donald Trump and the Republicans have been winning that conversation. So that is good news. Now, let's check this out. Do you think Donald Trump represents change or more of the same? It's the same question, but just replacing Kamala Harris with Donald Trump. And look at where he comes in. Major change, 51%. So Donald Trump represents 51% of major change. Now, if you combine that with minor change, you could say 61% of people believe that Donald Trump represents change, minor and major, because only 35% say more of the same. Now, I don't know what those 35%, I think what they're saying is it's just going to be the same old politics, right? Now, here's another question that I believe is very interesting. I want you guys to pay attention to this. And you know what? Put your answer to this question in the comment section below. What is the one issue that you believe is most important to you? Comment that below this video. I want to read what your guys' answers are. Now, what one issue is most important in deciding your vote this November? 21% of people say the economy. We know that, right? Then second is abortion. Okay. Then third is immigration. And fourth is inflation, cost of living. Now, understand this. Let's go ahead and separate these based on the candidates. So Trump wins the economy. He's at 21%. Kamala wins abortion. She's at 14. So he's up 21. She's at 14. He wins on immigration. Add that 12 to 21. You're at 33%. Okay. Inflation, he wins on that as well. So now we're at 40% to her 14%. The state of democracy, let's go and let her have that. Trump wins on policy. That's just the bottom line. The only thing he's going to lose on is abortion. And so the question is, will this election be decided on abortion or will it be decided on the economy and immigration? My money is on the economy and immigration because no matter what side you're on, you feel that. Not everybody feels abortion. That's just the reality of it. Again, this is Donald Trump's election to lose. He wins on almost every single issue except abortion and democracy. And I also believe if he just duplicates what he did at the Joe Biden debate, he wins the debate. I think it says a lot about her campaign that they are crying about the debate rules. Let's be honest. She wants the notes. She wants the teleprompters. She wants the mics to be on. And my other point about her that I truly believe in, and I want to be wrong. And so there's a video going around right now that is showing what she is doing days before the debate. Watch.
Trump wants to jail election workers. Madam Vice President, do you have a reaction?
Madam Vice President, how will you handle it on the debate stage if Trump decides to launch a personal attack?
Are you ready, Madam Vice President?
Oh, yeah, she's ready. She is as ready as she can be. This is going to be the biggest debate of her life. I'm not too sure she's going to respond very well. Now, if I was in charge of her campaign, I'd definitely be looking to give her some type of medication. Now, that might sound rude, but listen, I mean, she doesn't strike me as a person who really wants to be doing this. That's just my personal opinion.
President, I think you guys
ready to face Donald Trump?
Yes, I am. Yes.
best part of debate prep for you? What's your favorite?
Being at the spice store, I finally got out of the debate prep to look at these spices. Best part of debate prep so far.
So, quick announcement for you. I will be streaming the debate live on my channel. So,
Go figure. Follow me.